6 of them decide that the other 4 ought to be enslaved. And so they, put handcuffs on them and whip them and force them to do things for them against their will. Then that's demonstrably unethical. Those 6 people are engaging in psychopathic behavior.
Are you making the claim that ethics are objective?
Am I making?
Can you prove
objective morality?
Yeah, can you prove objective morality?
Well, it would be what would be the difference between those people that would cause those 6 people the right to rule over?
But you made the claim. You made the claim that it's psychotic and that it's delusional and crazy. What's the moral basis on that, and how do you found that?
Well, okay, you're going to have to be more specific with your sentence, because I never used the word psychotic for one. You're also going to have to explain what I claimed was delusional, because having 6 people in a room and having them enslave 4 other people, there's nothing about delusion regarding that. It is 6 people engaging in psychopathic behavior.
Okay, so how do you define
See, you just use psychopathic.
It sounds a lot like sin to me, right? It's like you shouldn't aggress against people because it's bad. And I agree that in general you shouldn't aggress against people, but I come at that generality by saying, like, it's genuinely better if we all have some trade and try to find some benefit. But I would never.
Yeah, an economic basis, a win-win relationship.
Yeah.
You're making an emotional, moral judgment on something, which you can't prove.
Well, of course I can prove it. How
do you prove morality? How do you prove that there is a objective morality?
Did the end of my sentence interrupt the beginning of yours? You sort of interrupted me mid-sentence.
Yeah, because you just made a point to my point, and you're obfuscating. You're not addressing my question here.
What are you claiming that I'm obfuscating?
You're talking the way that you're using words. You're substantiating that there's objective morality because you're making a moral claim.
Oh, at what point did I make a moral claim?
Well, you said it
something
was wrong.
You said it was demonstrable and psychotic, and
no.
Even if I did,
that's all moral language.
Even if I did take psychotic to be like, okay, that's clinically psychotic, that is not to say that being psychotic in any given circumstance wouldn't be the best option, or that's bad. I think you should consider that what you're saying is very similar to, like, declaring that something's a sin, therefore it should not be engaged in, rather than given the reason why it is a sin and why it is bad. If that makes sense.
You know why we don't argue in terms of morality, because it leads to, like, witch hunts. There's nothing to base on. There's no measures or scales to work with. So it's just as easy to declare that someone's a witch because you feel so, and she's demonstrable, and and you could burn her at the stake, compared to, well, can you prove that she's a witch, right?
No, that's not what I'm doing at all. You're doing apples to oranges at that point.
No, that's exactly what you're doing.
Well, actually, no.
Verbatim.
So first off, the person who keeps claiming that I'm using the word psychotic needs to fix the fact that he is using the incorrect term, a term that I have not
psychotic,
used in this conversation at all.
Psychopathic, you use both of those terms.
At what point did I use the term psychotic?
Okay,
in our conversation.
He said psychopathic, but whatever.
That's fine. I'll grant you that. Like, you said psychopathic. That's cool. It didn't change what I said, though, as far as my meaning, right? Like, you were using that clinical term as if that would be reason enough not to engage in an act because it would fall under the definition of psychotic. But
no, it wouldn't fall under the definition of psychotic. Again, it would fall under the definition of psychopathic. And psychopathic is by nature a criminal behavior. So we're not discussing only the clinical aspect of it and saying that is why it is bad. We're discussing
But
what
I mean,
psychopathic actually
wait. But you just used criminal, and the way that you used the term criminal is clearly circular reasoning in this case.
Okay, prove that. Prove your claim right now.
Because you're basically saying that laws are based on morals, and like something is immoral because it's psychopathic, and psychopathic is by definition criminal. It's a circular argument.
Where is the circular argument there?
You don't see how that loops back.
So
you're citing yourself.
So psychopathic is definitionally criminal. Therefore, the law is like. You don't see the circle there?
Well,
you really don't see the circle?
At what point did I say anything about a law?
You said criminal. Criminal implies laws, bro.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Let's look up the definition.
Okay, again, now you're begging
Let's just
begging the definition.
Well, now you're using an improper definition of the term criminal.
So now again, you're implying that there is an objective morality by saying that criminal is not synonymous with law.
How about I will agree to use any term of criminal that you want to lay forth. So please define your term.
Criminal would be violating someone else's freedom to do whatever they want,
and
who is causing no harm.
Okay. Who's the arbitrator of that? Who's the judge?
Well, the victim is the one. If you create it.
Look.
So now you want to enforce.
Wait. Let's cut to the chase, because we've had this argument a million times. This leads back to the NAP, and the NAP is so easy to break. It's fucking trivial. Like this is child's play.
Well, I would be happy to have the conversation if you would quit interrupting. Like if you want to have civil discourse, then I would be completely happy to hear how you believe that you can break down the non-aggression principle. However, you're going to have to stop doing things like using bullying tactics and interrupting the conversation.
Sure.
You're also going to have to prove your claims.
Okay.
I mean, it may be funny, but I mean, if you are interested in civil discourse, then that is something that I happen to have an interest in as well. But if you're going to just get on here and be juvenile and interrupt people during the conversation rather than actually have civil discourse.
Okay, make your case.
Okay, before that happens, Kev, I was wondering if maybe you could meet me over in the other group so that I could get some role play in.
Yeah, I'm texting him, so.
Jeez.
Well, what do you guys think? Are any other people in here that are actually interested in hearing it?
I don't know. We're on a different thing now.
But yeah,
I'd say anybody who is interested should go to the other group or something, because this is completely off.
Page? Oh God, shut it down.
I'll get a link. It's fine.
So, I would like to hear why you believe that it is acceptable to engage in slavery.
You were making the claim that it was never acceptable to engage in it, and I was asking like why that was, and what you laid out was that would violate the right of others as determined by violating their right to you not aggressing upon them. And I would say that is a difficult thing, because now I would like to have a definition of aggression, and how you're going to determine what is not aggression, what would be the penalty of said aggression, and why would that be beneficial to engage in.
Well, aggression is being the one to violate another. It basically, what you're doing when you are aggressing somebody is you are creating an involuntary hierarchy, and you're placing yourself above them, which is, by its very nature, unethical.
Is it though? What happens if you have someone who knows how to computer program and you don't? Isn't he
fucking Naptards
superior to you in that one facet of life? Isn't he higher up with that sort of knowledge?
How is that relevant to this conversation?
Well, it's proving that hierarchy is not bad. That you colloquially assume it's bad.
voluntary
No,
hierarchy.
I said it.
Solicited.
What I said is you're creating an involuntary hierarchy. So this is why words are actually important. Paying attention to the words that are used.
Here's the question, though. You said violate. Define violate.
Well, to violate somebody is to limit their freedom. So we all are free to do whatever we want, as long as we do not infringe upon another's freedom to do whatever they want.
Well, what if they're damaging my property?
Then they are infringing upon your freedom.
Okay,
so you can defend yourself.
What if property? So and you believe in what what is it? Interly verifiable subjective property? Because I have a definition.
What does all that mean?
Well, how are you going to define property? Because I would define culture as property. I would define a lot of things as property other than someone's physical person and their physical assets. And I would say that there is such a thing as group or communal property. And if somebody was like, would that be a violation to affect that? Because in that case, I would say that defending a culture from some aggression, would violate the rights of the people who own it. Would be the people who have it.
Okay, well, you're going to have to clarify what this strange sounding property is that you're talking about. What is this cultural property?
Well, the commons, for one. Culture, language, these are all things that are owned in a sense, right? Because those people are willing to try to defend it, right? There's a lot more, there's norms between people. You could make a case that those are all property of a sort, right? And
I fail to see how you could make a case that somebody's language is property.
People own it. People are willing to defend it.
How does anybody own the language that they speak? How do you own a word?
This is the problem, right? Like, you need to define what property is. What is the person that I'm aggressing upon? Is it just setting up hierarchy, or if I take from them, is that also aggression? And why should I respect their property?
Taking someone's property against their will is creating an involuntary hierarchy, because you are claiming by doing the act that you are above that person and that you have the right to take their property against their will.
Why should I respect that?
Why should you respect what?
Why shouldn't I take from them?
Because it is wrong to enslave others.
Why is it okay? What is wrong? This is very important.
Would you?
Like, you need to define your terms before I can ever.
Well,
go ahead.
I think that you should consider it like this. Would you want that behavior to be conducted towards you?
Yeah, but I mean, how is that relevant?
Say that again.
How is that relevant unless there's reciprocity?
What do you mean unless there's well? Explain what you mean unless there's reciprocity.
Well, like, if it's not a win-win scenario, right, then I have no reason to not aggress upon those people if it's profitable to do so, if it's not beneficial to do so. I mean, this is the course of human history. There's been sackers and pirates and raiders and whatnot. And of course, through the market, you can eliminate a lot of that because it's beneficial to trade, right? And once you have property, because you're producing things and you have families, it's beneficial to have reciprocity. And then you'll sort of band together to compete and exterminate those who are parasitic upon you, right? And there you work to limit parasitism. That's the framework that I run on. I don't deal with this like ghetto sort of as long as it's not a physical attack upon people, then it's okay, and therefore like the state is totally unjustified. You should never aggress upon others. This is all bad philosophy.
Let's run a thought experiment, right? Let's try and bring it down a little bit. So obviously, if I point a gun at you and shoot you, that's aggression, right? let's say we're neighbors. Let's say we're neighbors, and we're both mowing our lawn, and I just decide to pull out a gun and shoot you. That's aggression, right? Anyone gonna answer that?
Doesn't even want to debate, I guess.
Well, he's talking to you.
No, I'm talking to you.
He's talking to you.
I'm asking you a question. That's clearly aggression, right?
If oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were talking to me. You're saying if you have a neighbor and you decide to shoot them?
Yeah, you and I are neighbors, and we're both mowing our lawn, and then I just decide to pull out a gun and shoot you.
Yeah, that would be aggression.
That's aggression. Okay.
I mean, given there's no extraneous circumstances that cause it to not be.
For just no
Say
reason,
it
I
is.
pull out a gun and shoot you. So the slight alteration on the question. I pull out a gun and I point it at you. Is that aggression?
Yes.
Why? I haven't done any damage.
How do you figure that you haven't done damage? Why are you making the claim that you have not done damage in that scenario?
There's no physical damage. Prove that there's physical damage. I haven't shot you yet.
Why does damage only have to be physical?
Because try proving. What other type of damage could you prove objectively has been caused?
Are you saying that the act? Have you ever had a gun pointed at you?
I've been in pretty gnarly situations. Sure.
Well, I mean, yes or no. So when you had a gun pointed at you, was there a physical?
I've been in life and death situations.
Okay,
Yes.
and when you had a gun pointed at you, for example, was there a physiological response upon your body?
Yes, but proving that is a very difficult thing to do, and it also causes an equally large problem of the false claims of such a physiological response.
Well, there's always going to have to be false claims and whatnot to deal with. That is irrelevant, but it clearly has a physiological response upon the body. So don't point to the additional work that has to be done and say that that's not aggression, because additional work has to be done to determine what those physiological responses are. That's kind of absurd.
Well, I've worked on my I've set up a better way to explain this, right? So is blackmail aggression?
What do you mean by blackmail?
Somebody making up well, they have information on you and you're going to do something, or they're going to release it and embarrass you, or it would be damaging to your life in some way.
It would depend on how the information was obtained.
Let's say, just to simplify it, that they're like an all-seeing being. They have the information. They just know it. They're like God.
Then why would blackmail be unethical then in that situation?
So it's not aggression, right? Somebody, if they have information that they've obtained without let's just say they've attained it in a tasteful way, right? They just knew it. So that would be permitted.
Yeah, so I know something about someone else and I say, give me money or else I'm going to release this information. That's not aggression.
What about slander? What about libel?
Well, yeah, that would be aggression, because there you're saying false things about someone.
Why? Why is the blackmail like why? So you own your reputation to an extent, right?
Well, I mean, not necessarily. You don't own your reputation, but if somebody uses if someone falsifies information in order to cause you injury, then of course that's aggression. But if somebody tells the truth about something that you do that is distasteful and they didn't violate the non-aggression principle to obtain the information, then there's nothing wrong with.
But they're not physically. They're not. Let's just say they're not physically releasing information to cause you like physical body harm. Just people won't like you, right?
Well, why are you? First off, you're precluding all physiological responses that occur as a result of certain people so-called not liking you. Second, you are forgetting about all of the possible consequences that could result from people acquiring information.
Well,
so
go Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you
So,
off.
so if I, for example, I tell everybody that you're a Nazi, and it ends up causing people to come and kill you, then I was the one that initiated the aggression because I was the one that told the lie. Unless you actually are a Nazi, in that case, there was nothing unethical about what I did whatsoever.
I don't see how that well, you've changed the scenario I gave you to where it
How
was
so?
like, well, because it resulted in physical harm rather than reputational harm.
Okay, so if I tell everyone that you're a Nazi and now you can't get hired at a job that you were being considered for, and somebody else ends up getting hired instead, then I have caused you injury. If you were in line for that job,
Yeah, but if you told the
now you
truth
lost.
and that happened, you would cause me physiological injury.
Well, but I'm telling the truth. There's
Well,
nothing that I'm doing that is
why is
aggressive.
the truth? So basically you've created a situation where it's just too aggressive against me, right? Because
I'm sorry?
you're causing harm to me, but it's just because it's the truth.
Wait, let me add
Why
a
is
little,
that? Why
add a
you've
little bit
created a
here.
scenario where you can violate non-aggression by telling the truth about me, right? And that
Well,
this is somehow okay.
let's explore something real quick. So if it's true, it's not aggression, but if it's false, it's aggression. But what about the scenario where it's somewhere in between, right? Like it's someone called you a Nazi. Some people would believe you're a Nazi because of some of your beliefs, but you're not literally a Nazi. It's just you believe in evolution. You believe that that people are different genetically, including their brain and their mental capabilities.
Yeah.
And so it's not exactly true or false. It's sort of gray. Does that make it a sort of aggression?
Well, you're obviously not a Nazi, so it's obviously false. It's not the situation that you presented is not actually in the gray area. It's not actually.
But some people would call me a Nazi for those beliefs, though.
Yeah, let's just
some
take
people
an example.
Literally equate being a race realist with the equivalency of being a Nazi, right? So to some people, it is true.
Well, some people believe states exist. That doesn't mean
wouldn't you
that
have to define what Nazi means then, if you're going to call them that? So people that believe it is true, that have the criteria or the definition of Nazi different than the other people.
But at this point, I've already gotten fired, and it's already too late. And the people who believed the half truth, it's all irrelevant at that point.
And most importantly, there's a physiological response.
Well, and you caused aggression by claiming that somebody was a Nazi who was not. You told the lie. It doesn't matter what people believe in their delusional beliefs systems. That's irrelevant.
Why? I don't understand why it being the truth makes it okay to aggress.
You're not aggressing if it's the truth.
Why?
Well, where would the aggression lie?
You're causing a physiological response.
No, you're not. The person is by doing their actions.
The outcome is the same. If I get fired in either case, if I get fired, whether I'm in both scenarios where I'm a Nazi and where I'm not a Nazi, and I can't feed myself, the quote physiological repercussions have occurred. I don't see how it being true or not determines whether it's aggression or not. I think that's pretty absurd.
Well, what you just presented was a logical fallacy.
Which one?
And how so?
Well, you are claiming that because the outcome is identical, that the act is the same. That would be like saying that death by heart attack and somebody being murdered result in the same outcome. Therefore, they're both the same. Actually,
no, because your initial definition of aggression was it all kind of started from this physiological response thing, right?
No, my definition of aggression is violating someone else's freedom to do what they want, who is not causing harm.
You see how complicated that broad of a definition can get?
Well,
how untenable it is, really?
So far it has not become untenable. You're trying to rely on logical fallacies and whatnot to attempt to disprove it, but I've been pointing out the logical fallacies.
Okay, so I'm just gonna.
I feel like, wait a minute, real
the
quick.
Equivocation that you made between the two scenarios where the physical outcome of something was exactly the same, and no, your analogy about murder and a natural cause of death is not equivalent to. that's completely different than.
Physical and physiological aggression.
Your claim was, because in one circumstance you told the truth and it had the same outcome, and then the other circumstance you told a lie and it had the same outcome, that both of those are aggression. I disproved that by pointing to the fact that you're claiming that equality of outcome is what defines the action as aggressive.
That's a false analogy.
How so? What specifically is false about it?
Because between someone dying of a heart attack, a natural cause, and being murdered, those are two objectively different acts that happened, right? Very different. Whereas the physical act of telling a lie, or the physical act of me getting fired because I'm a Nazi, or me not getting fired because I was being lied to, or me getting fired because you get what I'm saying.
Well, those are
the exact same scenario. I'm the physical, what's going on, I'm getting fired, is exactly the same.
I've constructed a hypothetical.
Well, once again, you're pointing to the outcome, and you're saying you getting fired is the outcome, and that both.
No, it's not the outcome. It's the process as well. The process through and through is exactly the same.
No, it's not.
Yes,
one is telling the truth. Another is telling.
No, but that's not me. That's not me, and that's not the person that's firing me. Right? That's disconnected. That's a disconnected event. That's the third party that's telling the truth or not telling the truth. But the process of me getting fired by my boss is exactly the same through and through, whether it's a truth or a falsehood.
Right, but we're discussing whether or not the person telling the truth and or the lie is the one being aggressive.
Right, and that's where I was trying to kind of get in the middle, because I felt like the distraction was whose responsibility is it for the outcome. That's what I feel like it's turning into. But there's a difference between the responsibility and the cause of aggression, and what is being discussed. Because I can see where you're trying to go, but I feel like it's getting lost with one thing jumping to the next, because I feel like you're going from who's the aggressor, or is the person the aggressor? Is it moral? Is it immoral? Whose responsibility is it after the situation has ultimately finished and ended on a result?
Well, that's because there's no proportionality to the non-aggression principle. There's no sort of inbuilt thing for dispute resolution. There's nothing in there for why we should cooperate and do things. There's no hard definition that's been given for property. And then I have a
think about this. Let's just say this is how I see it. If I wouldn't want something to be done to me, it should be understood, and this is just my opinion. It should be understood by myself and my personal actions that I should not do that I do not want done to me.
But why?
So with that simple understanding, because if I don't like it, and I'm a human being just like the next human being, that means that it would be safe to assume that the next human being next to me would probably not appreciate it.
Well, yeah. So to address the point regarding there not being a dispute resolution built into the non-aggression principle, why would there be? The goal is freedom. You can create what sorts of dispute resolution, you can create what sort of systems you want. If you're trying to advocate an end result system and you're trying to enforce that upon others against their will, then you are aggressing. You're condoning slavery.
I never. But you have not laid out why that is bad. You have not laid out
why slavery is bad.
Yes.
Well, okay. So
if I adopt
how about
your
I
definition of slavery? I think it's broad enough that I support slavery.
Okay, so you don't mind then if I go to your mom's house and tie her up and keep her as a slave?
Of course I would mind that. You'd be
Why?
imposing cost upon me.
Well, how so?
But that's exactly what I tried to use as an example to make it so the simplistic manner to try to like debate to stop the debate about everything because there shouldn't be
against my property.
Well, right, so, but that's exactly the point.
So
you see,
okay, there's
you're saying
there's an assumption here that people own themselves, and I think that there are examples of people who do not own themselves. If the common benchmark for self-ownership is being able to claim one's own ownership over oneself, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that to me is the benchmark that I've heard in many of these debates, then there are certainly lots of people who cannot claim self-ownership and therefore do not own themselves.
So give me an example of someone who does not own themselves.
A mental retard.
That's okay. I don't think that's true. This is what I have to say. I'm sorry. Let me just say my piece because I've heard you guys for a long time and I just been wanting to say something. But so with that instance, for example, the reality, in my opinion, is that the retard, for lack of a better word, if in that case, if we use the same perspective that I presented, which was what I wouldn't like to be done to me, I don't do to nobody else. Inherently, if that's the thought process, then that, for lack of a better word, retard would think that way as well, just wouldn't be able to articulate it because of the handicap.
But then how do you deal with sadomasochists?
So, well, hold on, because let's deal with the retard first. Because the retard has a caretaker, correct?
Yes, they have an owner, ostensibly.
Okay, so this
slave master.
So that this caretaker would not be a slave master. This caretaker isn't an owner. There's somebody who takes care of the so-called retarded person.
Well, how do you define self-ownership then?
What do you mean?
How do you define self-ownership? Like how is it established that one owns themselves?
Well, what is there to own regarding yourself? Let's clarify that.
Are you talking about? You're the one that seems to be asserting that all, and correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but that all, at least at the minimum, all human beings own themselves.
I never said that at all. So
are there human beings that do not own themselves?
Well, I just asked you to clarify how someone could own themselves. What is the self that you
do you believe no humans own themselves?
I'm asserting that you are the one that has the burden of defining self-ownership in this instance.
I never brought up self-ownership. You brought up self-ownership.
Right, but it's implied. It's been implied in this entire debate for the last 30 minutes.
At what point did I bring up self-ownership?
Again, it's implied.
How is it implied? I mean,
I think you know very well how it's implied.
You're putting words in this guy's mouth. I don't think he's like a staunch Rothbardian ANCAP. He's coming from it from like a different angle, it seems.
Right, but we've had enough of these debates to know that, I mean, when you're talking about aggression, when you're talking about these things, this all boils down to self-ownership.
Yeah, you need something to aggress against. If people didn't have self-ownership, then if you shot someone, it wouldn't be aggression.
People's freedoms.
It'd be like shooting a rock.
Right, but why do they have freedom to begin with? The assumption, the implication is that they own themselves, and that's you're aggressing against their property essentially.
You keep using this term "own themselves," and I've asked you to define what the self is that one could own. So what is that thing?
Your body and the movement and the expression.
Motor functions, thought. You're able to think through things, critical thinking.
Okay, so are you referring then to the physical body?
Yes.
Well, I fail to see how it is that I own that per se. I exist within it.
You own it in the sense that you that you are like again. This is I'm trying to make a definition that I'm trying to steel man you here.
Here, I got it. If someone put you on an operating table and put electrodes in your brain to control your motor functions, they would own your ability to move, right? Like they could control that.
Well, no.
So there is functionality that you have that you consciously have ownership over.
Exclusive control over the motor function of your body.
Well, see, you're muddying the waters because you're claiming ownership over something that isn't definitionally owned. You're discussing control as though that is the same as owning something. If you attach electrical nodes to my brain and control the motor functions of my body against my will, you are likely aggressing against me.
But the point remains that at that moment, maybe I would have aggressed against you, right? But at that moment, I would have control over your motor functions.
Yeah, that doesn't change the fact that you have aggressed.
Yeah, but that's besides the point. I was trying to illustrate how one owns themselves, right? And that was an example. Like you own your ability to use your motor functions day to day, right?
So if you're going to claim that, then how about you define the word ownership?
He just did it poorly, unfortunately. It's exclusive control over the movement of or decision. Like, it's pretty simple. What I don't understand what's being lost here. You control your body with decisions that you make, and again, I'm trying to steel man you here.
Well, and that's right. Okay, so that's an absurd definition of ownership.
Okay, then you define. Let's work on your definition of ownership here.
Well, how about I point out why it's an absurd definition of ownership? Because I can give some of my property to somebody else to borrow, and for that time being, they control it.
But that's your decision. That's your decision.
That doesn't negate a definition of ownership. I own my car. I can lend my car to my brother. That doesn't mean I don't own my car.
So, well, if you're defining ownership as control, then by your definition, once you lend your car to your brother, he now owns it.
It's conscious control, right?
Refers to the property.
I'm sorry.
It's conscious control. Like you consciously can lend your car to your brother, right? And it's still
I see the point that you're making, but I see that kind of breaks that definition. I would say that definition is a minimum definition. It's
necessary but not sufficient.
Yeah.
Well, it's inaccurate, is what it is.
Okay, so give us an accurate definition of ownership.
Well, I hadn't thought of it before, so let me think for a moment. I guess I would think of ownership as having the highest claim to determine how that thing will be used, or
that seems like a distinction without a difference to me between the definition that I just gave you, exclusive control.
No, not it's a very different. It's a very distinct difference, because in one situation, like, I can choose to allow someone else to control my car, and I still own the car. They don't own it. I still have evidence that I own the car. Just because they control it, that who controls something is irrelevant. Who owns something could be relevant. So what I'm attempting to clarify is, what are you claiming is the self that can be owned? Are you just simply referring? Are you merely referring to the physical body?
I'm not the one. I'm sort of putting words in your mouth. I think it's implicit in your argument that all of what you've argued so far depends on some definition of self-ownership. I'm not the one claiming that one owns themselves necessarily. So
well, I haven't either.
I think it's rather implicit. Yeah.
Well, no.
Well, that's well, you're saying. You're
find
that implication.
Hold on. I find it contemptible to consider that a human body could be owned by anybody.
Even themselves.
Well, yeah, of course, because it's not ownership. You're just within your body.
Are you pro-choice?
I'm sorry?
Are you pro-choice?
What do you mean?
Because that's a strong argument when it comes to social libertarians, is that a woman owns her body, right? So it's her right, her choice. Are you pro-choice?
What is her right or choice?
Do you not know what pro-choice is? Abortion, dude.
Okay, and what are you asking specifically about abortion?
Are you pro-choice?
I don't know what you mean by pro-choice. You're going to have to be specific about what you say.
I've got to know. How old are you?
This is basic shit. Holy fuck.
Well, no, it's not basic. You're using a word.
Do you think a woman has the right to choice to an abortion?
Well, nobody has a right to anything. Rights don't exist. A woman has the freedom.
That's the first reasonable thing I've heard you say all night.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's still murder.
I have a hypothetical that'll be a little bit more profitable to throw out there than what we're going with right now. Is there any point by which you would aggress against another because the cost of not doing so would be so immense? Yes or no?
Would be higher than not doing so.
Well, define how this cost is determined.
Okay, if you do not, let's say a hypothetical exists where if you do not kill someone and take their money, the world will blow up and all life will be exterminated from Earth. In that situation, is it?
But he hasn't aggressed. He hasn't aggressed till he's hit that button to blow up the world, right? But he's going to do it.
Person. It's the no. That's not the. It's an innocent person. It has nothing to do with the world being blown up. And you have to kill them and take their money. They've never aggressed against anyone. Let's say.
And what happens if I don't?
The world will be blown up.
Okay, so whoever is responsible for blowing up the world and forcing me to make that decision is the one aggressing.
Let's say like it wasn't even an entity in itself. It's just like the laws of the universe. If you didn't do it.
Okay, that's sort of an absurd notion.
Yeah. It has to be somewhat absurd to create the hypothetical, right? Like, is there any point by which you would engage in aggression against somebody who has not engaged in aggression because the costs would be too high?
Well, just because I have the non-aggression principle and follow it does not mean that I would not aggress against somebody in certain circumstances.
And then it's not a principle.
And so that's wrong, right? Like it's
What would be wrong?
To aggress against a person.
It's just simply not a principle at that point.
Well, it is. It's just I'm willing to be held accountable for the aggression.
By whom?
Whoever needs to hold me accountable.
And if there was no one to hold you account?
Well, then I wouldn't be held accountable, would I?
And yet it remains that would no longer be a principle.
And what would happen if it was profitable over like a long period of time for you to engage in that? Like, let's say generations, right?
Give me an example.
Like when people set up towns and they went out and they killed all the barbarians, or they built walls to like separate themselves from barbarians, or when groups of people band together to destroy people who engage in activities that like impose cost upon them, like, you know.
Okay, so you're talking about killing people who are causing you to cost more. They're somehow aggressing against you.
But yeah, when people band together, well, yeah, but not in the necessarily in the physical sense, right?
Well, aggression isn't only about the physical sense. I mean, and ultimately, I think you will find that in all examples, aggression does boil down to a physiological response within the one being aggressed against, unless they're maybe a complete sociopath. But
you have a ban on all aggression.
I think that definition is really troublesome because okay, let's go back to the example where we're both mowing the lawn and I point a gun at you. Let's say I don't point a gun at you. Let's say I point my fingers at you in the shape of a gun, and then you claim that caused us. You got PTSD because oh god. So how do we actually go? How do we arbitrate that? Let's just assume that there's an arbitrator, be it a NGO of some sort or a government. It doesn't matter, right? It's arbitrary who the arbitrator is. How do we actually go back and determine that you're telling the truth, that I gave you PTSD and therefore you are owed some reparation for my aggression on your psychological sensibilities
through whatever process of arbitration that you have both agreed to use in that situation. You've already
my understanding is there is no way to actually prove your claim that gave you PTSD.
Okay, so well now you are placing yourself in the position of the arbitrator and you're making a determination. That's fine. What's wrong with that?
So we can all just make infinite claims about he raped me and she looked at me bad and or she turned me down for a date and I got
no, we're just
like where does this lead?
We'll just hire a hitman to your house and I'll kill you and I'll say, hey, he said mean things to me on the internet.
Yeah, well now you're just talking about things that already can happen. You can already make any claim that you want. So
right, but there's a reason that in the justice system that you have to prove objectively. This is the reason that Kavanaugh is not being tried with or convicted of a crime right now, as opposed to the opposite.
Okay, but how is that relevant to this conversation?
It is because you're claiming that that aggression all comes down to the physiological response, which is totally unmeasurable in most instances of something.
That's not what I claim.
And if you
now you're strawman.
You're triggering the shit out of me. You're triggering the shit out of me. I'm gonna just come over there and beat the shit out of you.
You literally just strawman my position.
I'm triggered.
No, those were your exact words. You said that it ultimately comes down to the physiological response.
That's not what I said.
Okay, clarify what you said.
I said that if you break it down, all aggression will ultimately have a physiological response.
Okay, so even if that physiological response is not like physical damage, but just some unverifiable chemical reaction in the brain that you can basically claim was whatever subjective experience you want it to be.
Well, now you're sort of leading into the scenario again where you start to strawman my position.
No, I'm really not.
You're literally not paying attention to the actual structure of the sentence that I'm speaking. So, any act of aggression will ultimately have a physiological response.
Right, and
that has nothing to do with claiming that any physiological response is a result of an act of aggression.
Okay, so again, this goes back to the second example that I gave where I pointed a gun at you, but I didn't pull the trigger, and you said, "Oh, well, but it'll have a physiological response." And that gets into this territory again where it is subjective. There's no way of objectively proving that I gave you PTSD or whatever the physiological response is. So
that would ultimately be up to whatever system you are a part of that arbitrates that matter. But the issue there is not the physiological response that you caused per se. It's the fact that you pointed a deadly weapon at somebody.
But I didn't aggress. I mean, how is that aggression though?
You didn't pull the trigger, dog.
I didn't pull the trigger. I didn't cause any physical damage.
What if he didn't see? What if you didn't see that he had the gun pointed at you?
You're scaring me. You're scaring me, and I'm gonna beat
Right.
you up.
See, this is why like it's important to say that like aggression is not an empirical term. It's not quantifiable in the same way that something like you've imposed cost could be theoretically like quantifiable or some other metric. It's just this vague, like open-ended. I guess I lack the
it is anyway.
It's a preposition, I guess, right?
Well, the issue, the problem is that you're muddying the waters by attempting to determine how every possible act of aggression might end up being arbitrated.
No. This again, the arbitration is arbitrary. That's completely irrelevant, right? The point is that that aggression is like Shmuley said, it's very vague, and it's a giant. It's not like this black and white thing, right? Like it's this giant spectrum. So here's an example, right? So I'm pointing the gun at you, so let's just assume for argument's sake that pointing the gun at you is aggression. Well, what if I pull the gun halfway up to pointing it at you and then I put it down? Is that aggression?
Well, if you lead me to believe that you might kill me with a gun, then there's no reason that I shouldn't be able to use up to and including deadly force to stop you at that moment.
How do you judge that?
I don't know. What's that?
What if you have PTSD, or what if you're a psychopath and or you're schizophrenic or something, and you just are paranoid and you just read into things that aren't there, and you, like, I was just mowing my lawn with my gun on my hip, and you read that as as that being aggression. So this is the subjective problem, right? This is subjective.
You have to be able to prove some sort of injury that was caused so that the aggressor could make you whole.
So you have to prove some injury. So me pointing a gun at you is not aggression then?
Well, sure it is.
Okay, how do you prove the injury?
Well, that's irrelevant. That's up to how.
That's totally irrelevant.
Shifting the goalpost. Come on now.
How am I shifting the goalpost?
Because you literally just said 10 seconds ago that you have to be able to prove. You have to prove the damages, basically, and then I went back to the example that where there was no damages, and then you shifted the goalpost.
How do you say there are no damages?
How do you say that there are damages? Prove the damages.
Okay, I will with an arbitrator.
Now you're the one that's relying on the arbitrator, not me. I said the arbitrator was. So this is.
Well, you didn't point a gun at me. So I have nothing that I can prove at this moment. You're talking about a hypothetical situation. If you pointed a gun at somebody and it caused them to have a heart attack, now you might have a situation where it will be discovered that was due to your act of aggression. And you are now responsible to make that person whole, because if the arbitrator determines that the heart attack was caused or likely caused by the fact that you pointed a gun at the person, now you have a responsibility to make them whole.
Okay, so what about intent? Does intent matter? Because this is stuff that like the common law and like the Western law tradition, this kind of been figured out for like hundreds of years. Like
I would place a great deal of importance on intent. Yes.
So I point a gun to shoot a bear behind you as my neighbor, and you have a heart attack, but the intent was to shoot the bear and not you, and so therefore, even though there are physical damages in this case, you having a heart attack, then it's not my fault because my intent was to shoot the bear and not you.
And again, that would likely be non-aggression. Yes.
Okay, but then in the case where I point the gun at you with an indeterminable intent, where you still holding on to the claim that is aggression, even though you can't. I mean, maybe we're good buds, and I'm pointing a gun at you for shits and giggles. Maybe it's just a gag. It's a gag. Is that still aggression?
That would likely end up being aggression. Yeah. Now, did it cause enough injury to cause the victim to end up filing a claim against you? I don't know, but that's up to the situation. So, I mean, you're looking at every possible hypothetical situation trying to determine, is this aggressive or not? But that's what arbitrators are for. That's what claims of injury
so
we
shouldn't push the limits of what is supposed to be an axiomatic first principles system
of why I shouldn't enslave or rob or kill or impose cost upon others. Right?
I mean, if we are to take at face value the term non-aggression principle, then it's a principle, and that means that it always applies. That's basically the definition of a principle.
If you guys are so focused on the principle and such terms, why is it? I feel like you guys are kind of straying away the fact that if something were to be done to you, if there's something that you wouldn't like to be done to you, wouldn't you think that someone else would feel the same way? Like if you wouldn't want something to be done to you, isn't that just a basic understanding?
That's such an insufficient.
Here's why you're wrong. Here's why you're wrong. You're wrong. Some like sexual deviant might like the idea of just some random stranger to come up to them and give them a hand job, right?
Right, but now you're going to extremes. I'm just talking about basic. Okay, do you want to die? 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 Do you want? Well, no. I'm asking you. Do you want to die tonight? Like right now? Okay, but that's what I'm saying. We don't want to. No, but that's the thing. The bottom line that all I'm trying to go through is basic. I'm not trying to go to extremes. I'm just keeping it really simple and basic. So for example,
right now though.
Right, but you guys are going levels above that with.
No, we're talking about law here, and law needs to be sussed out so that it's understandable.
But isn't laws based on morals?
Please let me answer his question.
Laws are based on science.
Kelton, guys, let me just answer his question real quick, which is, yes, if you impose cost upon me, I would want to limit that, right? Because you would be preying upon me. You would be basically in this case, this would be parasitism.
Hey, babe.
And so I would want to limit that, right? And I would like to band with other people to do that, to keep you from imposing costs. This is because I want to maximize win-win situations, and I have the principle of reciprocity.
Right, but I feel like can I slow you down real quick?
Yeah.
So, for example, with your point, I feel like you're going a little bit further than I'm trying to kind of keep it at. The simple thing is you wouldn't want to basically have a loss, right? Or anything negative that you wouldn't approve or appreciate, you wouldn't want to happen to you. So if we just keep it that basic, when it comes to all these hypotheticals, it's like it's being ignored that something you wouldn't like it to be done to you. So let's talk about it as if it's okay for it to happen to me.
No,
if it's not okay to happen to me.
I addressed this 20 minutes ago when I said, what about sadomasochists? You're just assuming that everyone has the same standards of what they want done to themselves, when it's clearly demonstrable that there are people who in fact do want damage done to themselves, and they do.
Well, I'm not.
It's not
right, but I'm not.
That I should not engage in robbing, thievery, and slavery. In fact, there's hypotheticals, right? If it's a win-lose situation, then it might be advantageous to just be the biggest guy on the block, right? The difference is that we produce things, that we have things, we want to seek win-win situations, and that's why we don't do that to each other. And if we do, we want to impose cost upon those engaging in parasitism.
Just because it's advantageous to enslave every single person on the entire planet and obtain a portion of their wealth. That doesn't mean that you should.
He just explained that, though. He just explained it's literally more advantageous to try to seek out a win-win scenario with everybody.
The only reason why things in the state are bad or good is whether it's a win-win situation and it's relative to the people engaging in it. Of course, the Federal Reserve System, that's an example of parasitism. right? A lot of our absurd, like, politician-made laws are engaging in parasitism for a small benefit of a group of people relative to the larger group of people, and it's in their imperative to stop them. But
So
that
what
all
is
can be sussed out, and it's actually quantifiable, like in position of cost. You can hypothetically and in reality, like, quantify that way better than aggression, right? And I don't need some, like, God on high or sin or anything like that to describe why we shouldn't rape, kill, and murder each other in general.
there's no sin or God on high about it. It's ethics. It's about equality of the human condition. It's we're equals. We're not. Why are
We're
we
not.
equal?
How are we?
Wait. Rephrase that. In which way are we equal?
We are equal in our freedom.
No, that's not true. There are people who are born paraplegic. They are not free to walk around. Redefine.
Well, they may not be free to walk around, but they still have freedom. They have the same freedoms.
Having the freedom to walk around, but not being able to walk around, I feel is a different thing.
I'm not convinced that it is.
They're both equal under the law, right?
Well, I mean, you keep bringing up this term law, but that's a very vague term. So can you define it for me?
A law could exist without a state, right? It's just like a mutually agreed upon conditions, right? Measured conditions.
I would okay.
In which trade and commerce and interaction occurs, right?
Well, there's no evidence that a state exists, so anything could likely exist without a state because everything does. That does exist.
I mean, I would agree. I would agree with you, but it's besides the point. I think my definition is sufficient.
So, well, you're saying law as opposed to statutes. I mean, you're using a language borrowed from science that is used.
Now you're just playing semantics with me.
No, I'm not actually. So, and also you interrupted my sentence. So you're using a term borrowed from science that is used to describe habits of nature, to describe what amount to human-created statutes, codes, ordinances. They could very well call them laws in their society, but there is no example of laws anywhere in the world at this time. As far as human-made things, they're all statutes, ordinances.
Define nature.
I'm sorry?
Define nature.
In reality, in objective reality.
So if a human creates something, right, that's still part of nature.
If a human creates something, in fact, yes. But diluting and creating rules, that's not creating a factual thing. That's writing down rules on a piece of paper or in a computer or whatever. Those aren't laws. Nobody ever calls them laws. They call them statutes.
What about natural law?
What do you mean by natural law?
What is your conception of natural law?
Well, I don't know what you mean by natural law, so I would fail to have a conception about it. Well, I'm familiar with some people's conceptions regarding what natural law is, but I don't know what yours is.
What's your preferred conception of natural law?
I don't have one. I mean, why would I concern myself with labeling something as a natural law? What would be the point?
You don't think
what's the point of labeling anything?
So you can quantify
it. It depends on what the thing is. So what would be the thing that I would be trying to quantify by labeling it as natural law?
The pack behavior of a pack of wolves.
Okay, how is that natural law?
It's a set of behaviors that the pack follows, and
it's a condition that's founded in reality.
Well, that's a set of behaviors that the wolves decided on and agreed upon. That's their own set of rules.
I'm not convinced that they all agreed upon it, but they depict they they follow this behavior, and they are part of nature,
Okay, so are humans.
Right.
That doesn't mean that if we write down statutes on a piece of paper that suddenly becomes natural law.
But if we don't write them down and it just happens to be matter of factly the behaviors that, let's say, a certain tribe of people happen to follow, is that natural law?
Sounds like instincts and ethics are being conflated.
I'm not making any ethical claims here.
That would be that tribe's set of rules or whatever. I mean, does the tribe refer to them as laws? I don't know. I mean, what is it specifically that you are trying to label as a natural law?
Well, I think this is all tangential anyway. I don't know that it's
any condition that exists within reality.
I think my main contention here, just trying to get back a little bit, because I think this is tangential, is your use of the term equality, right? Like you said, that equally free, and then I gave an example of how two human beings are objectively not equal in their freedoms, right?
How are they not equal?
Well, one person is born with disfigured legs, and they are objectively not free to walk around, whereas the other is.
How are they not free to walk around just because they weren't born with legs?
So if how do you define freedom if it's not something that you can do?
I think it's defining it in a negative sense, like free to not be attacked if you were to walk around. Or...
You are free to do whatever.
I understand the distinction between positive and negative rights, but I'm failing to see where the freedom comes in. If it's something that you are not capable of doing, then how are you free?
I think freedom is kind of a useless term. I think you highlighted it on previously in our conversation that if rights do not exist except by those that are willing to use violence to enforce them. And so I think liberty is a more effective term than freedom, because freedom is kind of meaningless.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that both freedom and liberty are similar, at least. I feel as though...
I would agree. I think freedom's more of a kind of a broad descriptor that people like to use, but I don't think it's... I don't think it's a very empirical term. I don't think you can really judge freedom compared to liberty.
So I would say that everyone has equality of liberty.
Okay, but I would still ask the same question. The person who has disfigured legs, are they at liberty to walk around? No, they're not. So how is their liberty equal to the person who is capable of walking around? I don't see.
Why are you claiming that a person who is born without legs does not have the liberty to walk around?
Because they don't. I mean, that's just an objective truth.
In their natural state, they do not have the liberty to walk around. Now, if they implore outside sources to do something, to get them prosthetic legs, then yeah.
All right, this is
right. So then that means that they wouldn't. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't have the liberty. That just means that they don't have the ability until circumstances change.
Yeah, but what's the difference? The liberty and ability. What functionally is the difference? That just means that they don't
have the ability until circumstances
the functional difference is some of us are capable of doing things, and some of us are not capable of doing things.
Okay, so how is liberty distinct from that?
Well, I have the liberty to climb a mountain, but I don't have the ability to climb a mountain unless I want to place my body. What's that?
Yeah, you do.
No, I don't. If I tried to climb a mountain, I would die.
Yeah,
I have to prepare my body.
There's some pretty easy mountains to climb. I've climbed lots of mountains. What do you mean?
Yeah, there's some tiny mountains.
Sure, but I'm referring to like a Mount Everest.
Mount Everest,
some big mountain. So I would have to prepare my body for the ability to climb Mount Everest before I could actually climb Mount Everest. My entire life, I've had the liberty to climb Mount Everest. I just haven't ever had the ability.
Well, here's the problem with that, though, which is that even in the instance where you take 10 years to prepare your body, you could still easily die, and people do die all the time. Even having
that's
prepared.
Not relevant,
so
though.
No, it is totally irrelevant, because you said that was the distinguishing factor is basically that you would die right now, but you could still die in the case where you were more properly able, in quotes. So that's not a valid distinction.
Well, yeah. Well, that what you just said is irrelevant, because I've always had the liberty to climb Mount Everest. Just because I don't have the ability, that's irrelevant. I have the liberty to.
No, you said that the difference between liberty and ability was that you would die because you were unable to do it right now, but you've always had liberty. But then if you trained a whole bunch, then you would be able to do it. But the fact is that even if you trained a whole bunch, that you could still easily die, and so that is not a valid distinction.
Well,
I feel like
yeah.
I feel like you're the only one that believes that, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like you're the only one that thinks that the ability and the freedom to do something is the same thing.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't see how that's an argument. That's not an argument. Just because I'm the only one making the argument, that doesn't mean I'm wrong. Come on.
No. I'm just saying that's your position.
You're demonstrating.
That's my position. I'm trying to find a suitable difference between ability and liberty. I don't know that there is one.
Really?
He always had the liberty, just not the ability.
So do you have the liberty to say do you have the liberty to well, I'm trying to think of do you have the liberty to solve or build a system, a decentralized system, a new cryptocurrency, for example? I mean, I don't know what your abilities are, but you have the liberty to create a cryptocurrency, but you may not have the ability to program it.
I have both.
Okay,
he's a programmer, but yeah.
Nice.
But say he wasn't, though, right?
The liberty to eat a 200-foot long sandwich.
Or let's just say you do you have the ability to travel the world? I mean, do you have the freedom to travel the world?
Well, I mean, the simple fact, I mean, that's pretty vague in and of itself. I mean, do you mean travel every square inch? Because if that's what you mean, then there are certainly lots of places where I'm going to die, and so.
Well, and yeah, you may die, but you also do not have the freedom to travel every square inch, because you might be trespassing in some circumstances.
Sure. So I have nor the liberty nor the ability, and I still don't see a suitable distinction between the two.
So you don't see a distinction between ability and liberty? I
haven't yet heard a suitable distinction. No.
Well, I just described a situation where you have the liberty to climb Mount Everest, but not the ability.
And then I pointed out that the only distinction that you actually drew in that instance was that you would die in one instance and not the other, and that is not a suitable distinction, because you're still very likely to die in both scenarios.
Well, that is not the distinction. It's that I am unable to. Like, for example,
it's the choice.
You are likely unable to beat me in a poker game. However, you are free to play poker with me. You have the liberty to beat me in a poker game. It's just not going to happen very often.
Well, now, I mean, talking about
I think we got to test this out.
Bringing likelihoods is also pretty muddying, right? Because I say this, I mean, that's basically the same argument. That's basically the same thing with the mountain example, right? Like you're the fact is that you might be able to climb Everest right now. Whether it's likely or not, that's unknown, right? That's an unknown. And it's equally unknown your rates of survival in the case where you train for the next 2 years.
You can always create a pathway to accomplish what you want to accomplish.
You can make yourself more likely to survive, but that still doesn't solidify the distinction between your ability and your liberty.
You have the liberty. You have the liberty to try and see every planet in the universe, but are you able to? No.
So that you have the liberty to try and see every.
Well, how is it functionally useless?
Because it's impossible to do. So there effectively is no liberty to try to see every planet in the universe.
Well, why are you making the claim that something is impossible?
Oh, come on! Don't go down that route, dude. Come on.
Well, I mean, what you're saying is there's no point in trying to do anything, because there are many things that were thought to be impossible that ended up not being impossible by the person who figured out how to do it.
Right.
So just because you assume that it is impossible to travel and see all the planets, that doesn't necessarily mean that is true.
I mean, I think with the current understanding of physics, it's
it's
a pretty safe assumption to make.
Well, I mean, do you think that there's nothing in this universe that's impossible for you to
do? Well, that's not really relevant to the conversation.
It is.
It's directly relevant to what you just said. I mean, there are things where I think that science would generally confirm that are safe assumptions of things to say that they're impossible to do. Now, there are things that are, sure, there are things that people thought were impossible, and that it was proved to be wrong. And you're saying, oh, therefore, basically anything is possible. Like that's the implication there.
Well, what are you referring to when you refer to the word science?
Our understanding of physics and entropy and
whose
time
understanding?
And science, the body of knowledge known as science.
If anything was possible, then like this idea that communists have about post-scarcity would work. But entropy literally refutes that.
Well, okay, so first off, before we get into entropy, I still need a solid definition of this term you're calling science.
Look, it's not. You're making a ridiculous. You're basically implying that anything is possible. We both heard you basically do that by making the analogy that there were things in the past that people thought were impossible and they turned out to be possible. You're basically implying that all things are possible, which is
not
absurd.
true. No, that's not. Now you're strawmanning the position.
Well, Kel asked you about 2 minutes ago explicitly whether you thought anything was possible, and you didn't answer him. So I'm.
Yeah, I don't have to imply anything. You're just being obfuscatory right now, and you can't. That's why I'm trying to. That's why I'm trying to ask you a question to highlight this.
Yeah, he asked it explicitly. Do you think anything?
And you said possible? I don't know how it's relevant. It's totally relevant. I'm trying to deduce your position here.
You're asking me if I think anything is possible? How would I possibly know?
Yes.
How would I possibly know?
More obfuscation.
How is that?
It's a yes or no. It's a yes or no.
You're saying
because we're talking about philosophy theory and what we think, right? So I'm asking you, what do you think?
We're not talking about philosophy at all. My definition.
I mean, science is firmly in the realm of ontology and epistemology. So yeah, we're talking philosophy here.
Are you using this word science again before you have defined it?
I actually did define it. I said the body of knowledge that we know of as science.
Well, you can't use the word in the definition of the word, but you also didn't clarify who this we is.
Oh man, you must be like a total subjectivist, like nihilist.
What do you mean?
Nothing matters, man. We're just all dust in the wind, dude.
Oh no,
it's possible.
I think everything matters. I think. I mean, there's a lot of meaning to life.
you use justificationism, like you use what do you call it? Satirism, right? You use like that
How
as
so?
your lens because you're a deconstructionist, right? And like
I don't know what that means. You're
you're reductionist. You try to break everything down into its infinitesimally small parts, so to somehow show they're disconnected.
Okay,
right?
I have a
Like,
word. Critique, right? You critique everything. Well, the state doesn't exist because they're just people that are doing, these things. And since everybody is an individual, and then there's only aggression, and like, yeah, you're just you critique everything rather than it. And I would say that you're like, because you have that worldview. I had that worldview at one point, right?
I don't critique everything though. I critique people's delusions. So far,
what's a delusion?
See, the state is a
How
delusion.
do you prove a delusion?
I'm sorry?
Would you not say that the state is a delusion?
Well, no, belief in the state is a delusion.
So
there is no state. I'm sorry?
There are just people with guns who organize in under banners and sets of rules, but that's not a state. That's just people.
Well, sure, there are groups of people, yeah, but there's
what's a group? What's a group? Wait, what's a group?
There's no evidence.
What is define group?
Are you going to allow me to finish first?
Sure.
Okay. There's no factual evidence that a state exists.
Define group.
A group? As far as I know, a group is just a number of people who are together in some sense. Or a number
so all of humanity's we're all just one group because we're all together on Earth, man. Right?
Well, it depends on your perspective. If you're looking at the planet from outside of the planet, then yeah, you would see, okay, that's a planet with a big group of humans on it. But it also has a big group of trees, a big group of dolphins, all of that stuff.
I think you are actually a moral subjectivist, and
what does that mean?
You play games to make it seem like you were a moral objectivist.
He's just using Talmudic pill pull. That's all he's doing.
I'm sorry? Well, one thing that you guys are doing is you're using terms that I doubt you could actually define if I ask you to define them. For example, you have yet to define science.
I think I satisfactorily defined science. Now, you may not have accepted that because I used a more colloquial version of it, where I just shortened it. I said, so it's a body of work, right? So there's I can get all autistic with you, and I can make the distinction between the science, the process, and science, which is the body of work. But I think that even just pointing the distinction out is sufficient to show that I know the difference, and I know what science means.
Oxford,
and I know that you do too. So
the body of work regarding
that
the body of work.
Oxford. Let the British man read the Oxford Dictionary. It's going to be very
Science,
helpful.
The intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behaviour of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. I also give a definition of liberty earlier.
That basically includes both the body of work, right? It implies the body of work through using the process of gathering enough observations, right, that you can create models and then have predictive models of what will happen. So, okay, yeah, now we have a working definition of science. Great. Where does that get us?
Okay, well, I guess I'm a little curious as to what you are claiming is impossible based upon your belief in science.
No, see, nope, not going to let you do that.
Do what?
It was a simple question. Do you believe that anything is possible? Nope, not going to let you do that.
Do what? I would only be able to look at each specific thing that you're claiming is.
No, so then you're not making any claims. I never made a claim.
I would only be able to look at each specific. Well, what I'm saying is how can define anything? Are you saying anything that one could possibly imagine in their mind? Is that possible? Define anything. Are you saying
and everything besides that?
possibly imagine in their mind? I have no idea. Is that possible?
Is anything possible? So wait,
I don't have enough
so
information.
is that equivalent? Is I have no idea equivalent to saying that no, some things are not possible?
No, it means that I don't have enough information to determine what is and is not possible.
Okay, are some things not possible?
I don't have enough information to determine.
Is a square circle possible?
What is a
In
square
wrestling,
circle? Oh my God!
If you
Jesus Christ.
No, if you don't know anything, an example of anything that's possible, dude, then you should just not think at all, because it's.
Well, give me an example of something that is. Give me an example of something that is impossible.
A square circle.
That which is
axiomatically impossible. Axiomatically impossible.
Yeah, as we define shapes, sure.
Okay.
You're just a little weasel, dude. That's all you are. You're just sneaking around the argument and not willing to stand up to anything that you fucking claim. You're not willing to have some balls.
Anything that's a square, possibly a circle anymore. It's no longer a circle if it's square.
Right. That's the whole point. We just cornered him into admitting
no,
that
that's an asinine statement to even make. How would you even possibly consider that reasonable?
No, look, all we were trying to get him to do was admit that some things are not possible, whether it be in the physical world.
But to say that a circle cannot be square,
but it's not a thing.
Is simply saying that they're not the same thing, which we already know.
Yeah, I mean, we know.
This was an exercise to get you.
That's
to
why
admit
he.
something.
That's why
elementary, of course.
In such a way.
Is it? What is it that you thought you were getting someone to admit? I mean, you're simply irrational.
That there are things that are impossible. It's a pretty simple thing to admit.
It's impossible because it's not even. If it's a square, it is not a circle.
Well, you are agreeing with me, whether you realize it or not. You are agreeing with me.
I'm not saying that I am disagreeing with you. I'm asking you.
That's all y'all.
So dumb. She's so dumb.
So what I
can I say something really quick?
Go ahead.
So how about, in order for you to actually know if something is impossible, you have to know about the situation in order to make an assessment to assume or make the accusation that it could be impossible. Because as he mentioned, there was plenty of things that people thought to be impossible until someone challenged the status quo, went against it, and made it, figured it out.
So what you're essentially suggesting that I do is that I assume that he and or anyone else engaging in this debate is so stupid that they can't come up with an example of something as simple as a square circle, which is definitionally impossible.
Well, I have to.
So if it, but that doesn't make any sense. But why would you use something that doesn't make sense?
Fucking third graders, dude.
Hold on.
This is
I have to
5,000-year-old philosophy shit.
I have to point to the problem of bringing up a square circle as the impossible thing.
So yeah, now you're just gonna invalidate language. You're basically just saying, by even just saying what you just said, you're basically just saying language is meaningless, which basically means that this entire conversation is fucking useless.
No,
hold on.
Because every shape requires angles in the quantum plane.
You're making assumptions about what I am going to do, and no, language is quite meaningful. So if you allow me to bring up the problem with bringing up the square circle as an impossible thing, the square circle is those are definitions that we created to define something. So for a square to be a circle, by our definition, would be impossible. But what has nothing to do with one's liberty to do something. Like I have the liberty.
Now
you're backtracking.
You're massively muddying the waters.
Now,
You're massively muddying the waters because again, I brought up a very, very simple example, and it took that ridiculously simple example for you to actually say, oh well, okay, well maybe that's not possible, but you couldn't just come out and say, well, yes, there are things which are impossible.
So are you saying that I do not have the liberty to create a square circle?
Yes, you do not have the liberty to create a square circle.
Why not?
because definitionally it is impossible. And again, now you are implying, just by saying, just by that very statement, you are again implying that basically that reality is subjective. There is no objective morality or reality, because you're basic. And now you're saying that basically words are meaningless, by even just trying to do this thing like, oh, are you saying I can't make a square circle? That's implying that the definition of square is meaningless enough to be interchangeable with the definition of a circle.
You're just a disingenuous debater. There's
I have a question, Risky. So,
sure.
For example, based on what you just said, if you look at it like that, then wouldn't that mean that when people said certain things were impossible, that means that no one should have ever been able to prove that wrong?
Dude, I think you're on I think you're on so many levels lower in this debate that you don't even realize it.
Well, that's an argument to that.
We're so
but you haven't. But if shouldn't you be able to answer that though?
Re-ask the
question. He can. It's
pointless. I would like to continue to debate them because I want to be able to point out the logical fallacies that they are using. Despite the fact that you believe that a square circle is an impossible thing to create, I could easily create a widget and call it a square circle.
Oh my! And now, and again, you just proved my point that words are meaningless. And again, you also just
You're probably Jewish, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're Jewish, aren't you?
I'm sorry?
Ghetto ethics.
You're using your stupid religious bullshit on us. You're trying to use your Talmudic reasoning. It's fucking
religious?
garbage,
What are you talking about? Religious?
Your worldview is similar.
That
to
is
that of
hilarious.
I'm sorry. What accusation are you making now that you won't be able to prove?
No, put that shit aside, guys. Come on. Okay, again, you literally just confirmed like that the statement that I made, where I said I should, like, you're suggesting to me that I assume that you are so incapable of using the most common definitions as is most productive and most optimal, and the entire point of using language, that I assume that when I say that you cannot make a square circle, that you're not gonna just go, oh, I can just make square circle TM and that's sufficient to make a square fucking circle.
Well, it does matter what the definition is of a word that you were using. So I could easily ask you what definition you have of a square.
It is thoroughly understood by everyone in the room that when I say you cannot make a square circle, that I'm talking about the geometric formation of 90-degree angles and then pi, and you cannot make something that is in both of those states at the same time, not some like copyrighted square circle widget that has nothing to do with basic geometry that the Greeks were arguing about 5,000 years ago. Come on, dude.
So why can you not superimpose a circle onto a square and have that be a square circle?
That's a circle and a square. It's not a square circle.
Okay. All right. So I can agree with that.
Oh, finally. So we have finally established that some things in the universe are not possible. It's fucking incredible.
Okay, but what does that have to do with the liberty to do something?
You don't have the liberty to do things that are impossible.
Such as?
Create a square circle.
Why you don't?
Dude.
You're just a little weasel, dude. You're just a dirty little fucking weasel.
If we redefine words to mean things that don't exist and we divorce it from all logic and math, then I can make my arguments hold true.
Well, no, I will use logic and I will use math as long as you're not basing your mathematics upon a flawed foundation, which I suspect you are. I also suspect that you're basing...
I just gave you the perfect the geometric definitions of a square.
You're a fucking joke, dude. Go back to school, dude. Go back to school, you little weasel.
Like 14, dude? How old
are
you?
I already told you that I agree that one could not create a square circle. So we're in agreement there. However, that does not mean that
not at first, you little weasel.
You notice how when we take things to operational language and make you speak in like quantifiable terms, how quickly you talked yourself into a circle, and how your strategy fell flat when you couldn't use language to just like manipulate things and
well, I'm not
weasel around.
Yeah, I'm not weaseling around. I'm not manipulating things. I'm asking you to prove your claims. So
you're done over and over and over again. I've defined every term I've used. I've pointed it out.
Here's how this works. You ask for a definition. He gives it. You give a critique of the definition, and then act as if he hasn't given you a definition that you could run with, but you choose not to. And then you reframe things.
And then I forced you to use my definition, which is logically consistent, for 20 minutes, and then we finally end up here at you accepting the definition, and we've basically lost where we were.
Well, so I'm asking you, what is the relevance of distinction?
That's why you're a weasel.
Circle?
Even though I just answered this not 4 or 5 minutes ago, and I said you are not at liberty to make a square circle. So
why not?
Because it's impossible.
Liberty Could you just fix this whole problem by saying at liberty to try to do something, even if it is impossible or not?
Yeah, but I mean, I pointed out the problems with that with the mountain.
I don't think you were here. I don't think you were here earlier.
Yeah,
we already highlighted that.
We've gone through this circle. We've gone around this 2 or 3 times.
Circle
yeah,
times?
but you're indicating that a paraplegic, it's impossible for him to walk, and it's not.
They are not at liberty to walk.
No, we never said it was impossible. We said they were not.
How do you figure they're not at liberty to walk?
They were
because
not
they are incapable of walking. They do not have the liberty. Okay, look, we're just going to have to bust out the definition of liberty, which I am very confident is going to confirm that basically exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, feel free.
And at that point, I will have shown that your distinction between liberty and ability is meaningless.
Okay, so go ahead and break out the definition. Definition of liberty: the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's behaviour or political.
Read all of the definitions. Read all of them.
Yeah, a right or privilege, especially a statutory one. That's the 2 definitions in the Oxford Dictionary for liberty.
I'm 100% certain there are more definitions than that. Fine,
well,
keep going.
Yeah, I mean, you're having somebody read the opinions in Oxford Dictionary and attempt.
Okay, so like words are totally meaningful except for when the actual authority, or like the consensus authority of those words is not convenient. What other authority would you prefer to settle the definition of liberty?
Well, all we have to do is agree on the definition of liberty. So I'm just waiting for you to present one.
Oh, yeah, the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved, the power or scope to act as one pleases. That's quite a key verse to this one, considering you're on about you can walk and you can't.
Sure, because even in the instance of being enslaved, the paraplegic is enslaved by the nature of biology, and it is therefore the nature of biology is restricting their liberty. So
no,
again,
it's not.
Liberty and ability are effectively the same.
I've met paraplegics.
If he can't walk, that means he can't act in the power of scope to act as he pleases.
I've met paraplegics who could walk.
Oh my god.
As have I.
Okay, someone who has no legs and they don't have prosthetic legs and they don't have fucking magical levitation shit, right? Okay, someone who has no legs is not at liberty to walk.
Yes, they are, because they can create any type of way to walk that they can using their resources.
In the current moment, barring creating a surrogate set of legs, they are not at liberty to walk.
Why not?
So wait, so if they were to get prosthetics, that means the prosthetics gave them the liberty to do that?
Yes.
So it's not inherent amongst themselves. They have to ask for permission to use it from the prosthetics.
You have to obtain property to do things that is not within your means, right? That's the human
Sometimes.
condition. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're trying to
and this is an
establish
example
a
of that.
meaningful difference between ability, the definition of ability, and liberty, and I still think that I have thoroughly shown that there is no functional difference. You can play all these time-based obfuscation games like, oh, well, but in the future when they create something that gives them legs, then they'll have liberty to walk because they have legs now. No shit.
Well, okay, so what is your definition of liberty then?
It's effectively ability. He just fucking read them, dude.
So your definition, I'm asking for your definition of liberty. Your definition of liberty.
My definition of liberty is effectively the same as the Oxford English Dictionary, which
that's what we're going off.
Particularly, the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved, and then the next one that he read off.
The power or scope to act as one pleases. So,
so that definition right there is literally just saying the ability to do something.
You keep talking over the person who's reading the actual definition, so I've yet to hear it.
I wasn't talking when he. I started talking at the end of that. Don't play these time games.
Well, no, you literally.
For the young lad here, it says the power or scope to act as one pleases. So therefore, if you don't have legs, you don't have
the power
the
or what?
No. The power or scope to act as one pleases. So if you don't have legs, you can't walk. Get what I mean?
I'm not able to determine what that other word is. The power or what?
Scope. SCOPE. Correct?
The pen's gone.
Right. Again, so that definition is literally just equivalent to the definition of ability.
Well, hold on.
Which is what I've been arguing for the last half hour, is that there is no functional difference between liberty and ability. If you are chained in someone's basement, you do not have the liberty to walk around freely, right? Like, you do not have the liberty to get up and go get a glass of water because you're fucking chained to the basement. You don't have the ability, you don't have the liberty, they're the same thing.
Well, that's assuming that is the only definition of liberty, but that doesn't apply in this situation, because we're talking about liberties as far as being
implying a moral. You're implying an ought from an is. You're trying to say that what should be is the definition of liberty, whereas that's literally what you just said.
How so?
I am claiming that liberty is a state, a matter of fact state of reality. You are implying that it is some other thing, which I can only divine to be some moral ought.
So no, I fail to see that, because if you it's still the same. If you violate somebody's liberty to do something, then you are aggressing against them.
See, we've debated guys like this before.
For like 6
months.
So
I think.
Let me
I see.
Let me have a word in here. We've debated guys like this before, and what they do is they'll ask you questions on everything about you, and then once you direct a question at them so that they can state their position, so that you can do some reductionist bullshit like he's doing to every little argument that you're having, he will refuse to, because he doesn't have a position. I just don't know. It's like, then why even have a debate? You're just a nihilist, dude. Nothing matters.
There's nothing that I will. Well, it wouldn't be refusal, because refusal implies obligation. But I would not decline to answer any question at all that I am capable of. No, there's.
I think that's an assertion that refusal
implies
obligation. But okay.
I think you have. I think the time of our debate here has proven that statement incorrect.
Well, what question are you claiming that I have not answered?
A whole bunch of them.
Name one.
I think that's an assertion.
Well, at first you would not answer if you thought that there was something. If you thought that anything in this world is possible, anything in reality is possible.
The question is too vague.
No, it's not. It's really not, dude.
I'm not asking.
Really,
I'm not. I wasn't asking.
It's literally a yes or no answer.
I wasn't asking you an empirical question. I was asking you, what do you think on the matter? And you don't want to give your position because you do this reductionist horse shit with us. But if you gave your position, then someone would be able to do that to you. So you're just a weasel.
I did give my position. I don't have enough information to determine what is.
Well, you changed that, right? Obviously, after we talked about the square circle, right? You changed your position, and just goes to show that yet again you're acting very weaselly.
Well, should one not change their position if they realize that their position was incorrect?
But you didn't just freely realize. You did it clawing at the walls of.
You knew that beforehand. That's why you were so quick to answer.
Well, you're going to do it too. Like anything that you believe is correct, and when I present the notion that what you are saying is incorrect, you are also going to claw until it is proven that you are incorrect.
Well, I'm going to debate. Wait,
so you don't want to have a. So basically, what you're saying with that statement is you don't want to have a good conscious debate. You'd rather just argue for the sake of argument.
No, I definitely want to have a good conscious debate, but I'm going to make sure that what you are claiming that I am wrong about, you are able to prove me wrong. That's all there is to it. I'm not going to just believe things without evidence.
Well, I think that I don't know. I think that your belief in the non-aggression principle, it suggests otherwise.
Oh, well, so, I mean, I would say that there is no belief in the non-aggression principle. I would say that the non-aggression principle is the only ethical principle that one could hold as a first principle.
But I already addressed this like an hour ago, that we established, I think, relatively certainly, that it is in fact not a principle. As long as you can find one example, a principle has to hold true always, right? And if you can find one example where you don't follow it, then it's not a principle. It could be like a rule of thumb or like some sort of suggestion. It's like it's most often optimal or something, but it's at that point not a principle.
He's suggesting that there's no situation in which it would be immoral to follow the non-aggression principle.
Well,
he needs to define morality, and then I would say he should really give a reason why we should actually worry about like morality in the sense that he's laying out, or being ethical.
Yeah, he sure cares about some things like slavery, right? But everything else, right? Like, oh no, we can never figure anything else out.
Yeah, like blackmail. Like you can't punish people for blackmail or what do you call it? Like revealing.
You're just a disingenuous debater.
Well, why would you punish somebody for blackmail?
Because they're imposing cost upon others. They're engaging in destruction of someone's property, aren't they?
How are they engaging in destruction of somebody's property?
People don't like having blackmail released on them, don't they?
Depends on what they're being blackmailed
against
for.
It, right?
Well, what you like and do not like is irrelevant. It's a voluntary.
I think it's pretty fucking relevant whether people would come and do this. See, you're justifying parasitism now.
How so?
Because you're justifying the use of blackmail or doing things that impose cost upon others, as long as the two people engaging in it are doing so voluntarily.
Well, of course. And so what is an example where blackmail would be unethical?
I didn't use the term unethical. That's not what I said.
Okay, so what is your problem with me saying that blackmail does not violate the NAP in and of itself?
That would give, well, if we followed and agreed to that, then we would be licensing, we would essentially be giving full license to people to engage in blackmail and impose cost upon other people.
But they're not imposing a cost. What cost could they possibly be imposing?
People own their people own
create
their...
create a hypothetical. I mean, it's really hard to argue about this kind of shit without at least a some sort of hypothetical example,
Okay,
right?
let me think. So you find out that I like to tickle teddy bears or something, and we live in a situation where everyone will hate that, right? So you take that information that you have on me, and then you go about if I don't give you money, if I don't give you money, you're going to damage my property. You're going to damage my reputation, right?
Well, hold on.
With the NAP, because it's coercing someone into doing something for you or giving you something, which is the...
Oh, is it a violation of the NAP?
Yeah.
Well, really? Well, he just said that it wasn't. So how are you guys going to settle the dispute here between the...
Yeah, so I'm attempting to find out some things first off. How did I acquire this information that you like to tickle teddy bears?
You obtained it completely lawfully. You overheard me say it to somebody else.
Okay, well, I don't understand the term lawfully, but I think I understand what you mean. So I overheard you say it to someone else. So now, why would it be unethical for me to sell that information to someone?
No, to extort money out of me, to say that you will unless I pay you off. That's
you tell everyone unless he gives you $1 million.
How is that extortion?
That's the definition of extortion.
How? How so?
What do you mean how? That's what human beings decided was the definition of distortion. Right? What do you mean how?
This is my point. My larger point is that this is just one example. There's going to be many examples of, let's say, selling heroin to children, or just things that people would want to limit or want to impose cost upon. They don't like it. They see it as predatory, and they don't want it happening in the commons, and they're willing to try to stomp it out. You're using like a ethical, let's say, ethical justificationism to try to say that it's bad for them to do that, right?
Well, I don't know yet. I guess it depends on how you are trying to stomp it out. But first, I want to get to this conversation regarding the blackmail, because I want to know what is wrong with me telling you that I will accept money in order to not share information to others. Why is that wrong?
Because engaging in that is a...
Well, I would.
You're damaging my property.
How so?
Because you are going to attack my you're attacking my property, right? In the sense that my
what property am I destroying? Your reputation.
Isn't your reputation just an idea in someone else's head? And to claim that you own your reputation is claiming you own someone else's mind, or a piece of their mind, essentially.
Yeah. How is your reputation property? Can you explain a circumstance where reputation would be considered property, or how it would be considered property?
It's really like, I can't construct. I can't. I was trying to think of a. I mean, it's hard to, because it was really a benign point. I was trying to take the. I was trying to expand that further, and I failed to do so. I was trying to use it as an example of things that people find distasteful and they would want to limit, but you would say that it's wrong for them to limit it because...
Well, under his conditions, it would be viewed as aggression against you, right?
Well, it's not wrong
against
to limit
your against your
wins. It's not aggression against me, right?
It's not wrong to limit something as long as you don't aggress against anyone.
Okay, let's change examples. I liked the giving heroin to children example. Run with that one.
Yeah, well, people find that extremely distasteful, and they don't want their children getting addicted to
Right,
heroin.
but it's a voluntary exchange, right? I mean, you're gonna sell them the heroin, and they're buying it voluntarily, right?
Yeah.
Well, are the children? I mean, what is the situation with these children? Are they accountable for themselves?
They have money.
What does accountable mean?
Okay, so why would it be wrong to sell heroin to someone?
I'm not making the claim that it is. It's distasteful to me. I want to live in a society where children aren't doing heroin.
Yeah, one might say that it imposes a cost if there's people out there convincing children that heroin is a cool thing to take and selling it to them.
The cost is imposed on the future productivity of that society, right? Because those children are not going to be
legalized, and they won't want to do it.
So is the person selling heroin to children, then, is he causing injury?
To the future potential of those children, I would argue yes.
Yeah, but the children are consenting.
And therefore to the society, yes, they're literally damaging the future productivity of that society.
So then submit your claim to the system of arbitration that you live under or have chosen
submit your
to
claim
live with.
to Google Incorporated Arbitration Division.
or you could do like what people actually do and like set up a system to suppress people who do those things, right?
By force.
Yeah. Which is like a really efficient way to do that, and it's like an efficient way to limit costs, right?
Like 100 of us live in a neighborhood, and we just say, this guy's selling heroin. I don't like this. Let's band together and pay Bob over here to carry a gun around, and if we see this guy, we're gonna point it in his face.
Yeah, but how are we gonna pay Bob? Well, I guess we all have to pitch in, right?
This is the ghetto ethic that he was referring to earlier, where the guy walking around selling heroin to kids is not aggression, but pointing the gun in the heroin dealer's face is aggression. You realize how absurd that is, dude, don't you? Just take a step back from your fucking ideological frame and just look at the fucking at the scenario that we're talking about here.
Hold on 1 second. I wasn't able to hear that because I have to help someone with something real quick. Just give me 1 second. Okay, you're friends with her now. So now you can see.
Yeah, hold up. Hold on a
second.
There you go.
Okay.
So yeah,
Thank you.
If she sends you something, you'll be able to do it.
Is my audio
okay, go ahead and
now,
say what you were saying. Sorry about that.
I was just saying you should take a step back because what you just said is pointing the gun at the guy dealing heroin to children. That's the aggression, but not the guy selling heroin to children. And I suggest that you step back and kind of step out of your ideological attachment to the NAP here, and you take a good look at what you just advocated for.
Well, I am aware of what I said. The issue is I said that in response to you saying that how about instead of submitting a claim and using the system that we have all
submitting a claim to whom?
I'm sorry.
To whom?
Well, you would have received that answer if you allowed me to finish the sentence. So if you submit a claim to the arbitration or the manner in which you have set up in the system that you live in, then you can determine that there may be injury being caused by somebody selling heroin to children. But you actually
sounds a lot like what we've got right now.
Huh. Yeah, but why? But what claim are you gonna have? Because this guy is, I mean, they're two voluntary people, like private people having a voluntary interaction. The guy selling heroin to the children.
Yeah, it's only when your child overdoses and dies on the heroin that's when the damages have been established.
Could you possibly claim that they sold somebody something that didn't know what it was going to do entirely, or didn't warn them of the effects they knew it would have?
But why is that aggression? I mean,
well, it could be fraud.
Yeah.
Oh, and fraud. Why is fraud?
If you lie to, well, if you tell somebody they're getting one thing and they get something else.
No, but it's exactly what. Okay, he wasn't lying. He never said it was heroin, but it was actually meth. It was he said, "You want to buy some heroin?" It's pretty tasty, kid. It's good stuff. It'll make you feel yummy. It'll make you feel good. You want to do it? There's no lie there. There's no fraud there.
You have to do heroin.
What?
Well, so where is the injury being caused then?
Really, dude? You've never had a friend who's on heroin, have you?
See,
yes, I have actually, but they chose to injure themselves.
Yeah, well, you see, the problem is that people don't want, like, all of a sudden a problem where they have a bunch of children hooked on heroin, when it would be a lot cheaper to go out and eliminate the person selling them heroin.
So your notion is, instead of being able to prove that the person selling the heroin is causing injury, you're just going to eliminate that person?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, well, if you're going to be eliminating a person when you have no evidence at all that they are causing injury, then you are the one causing injury.
Yeah, see, this is your ghetto ethic, right? You're giving free licensure to people to engage in predatory.
Let me wrap.
No, I'm not.
Let me come full circle with this. I'm gonna wrap this up, this bitch up nice and tight. All right. So, back to the example where we're neighbors and I point my gun at you and I don't pull the trigger. You're gonna have to prove that I caused damages, which I didn't, and you can't prove. So that's therefore not aggression, even though that was the argument you were making about an hour ago.
I already said that you would have to prove damages, and yes, that is likely aggression.
Okay, what damages can you prove? What damages can you prove? If you're claiming that's likely aggression, you're saying that there's damages that are likely provable, right? So what damages have I caused that are provable?
It depends on the situation.
I pointed a gun at you. That's the situation.
Yeah, it depends on other factors. That's not the only factor that matters.
That's it. We were both mowing our lawn, and I pulled my gun out, and I pointed it at your head.
Okay, so you're making no factors about who the people are?
We're neighbors.
Well, that's irrelevant. You're basically trying to boil everything down into, well, we have questions. How old is the person having the gun pointed at them?
We're both adults. I'm assuming you're an adult, even though I probably shouldn't be.
What sorts of things have they encountered in their life? What are the possible damages?
And this is where you go down the subjective rabbit hole of nihilism. There's everything. Oh, okay. So what they've been through in their life, that's what determines if you can objectively prove if there's been damages or not.
That's not what I said.
Get the fuck out of here.
That's not what I said.
That's what you just implied.
That is not what I implied at all.
Where are the damages? Where are the damages?
It depends on.
Where are the damages?
It depends on.
What does it depend on?
The damages and evidence of those damages.
Does the damage have to be just the children, or could it be on the fact that now we have an increase in children on heroin? In the hypothetical.
I'm sorry. Are you going back to the heroin situation?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like. Maybe I was off the topic here a little bit. I apologize if I am. I'm just saying, like, you would probably be arguing that the damage would have to be caused to the person one of the two parties engaging in the activity, and not the externalities caused from the activity.
That's not what I said.
Okay. So you do think that people should be able to impose, like... punish people for causing externalities that impose costs to other people. Yeah.
I fail to comprehend what you mean by commons. That is a vague term that I think you have not defined yet.
However, I actually have. I'll go bring up the thing and I'll post it in the chat again, or I can read it out.
Okay. So, if you can show a correlation between someone's action and an injury somewhere, then you have a claim. It's that simple. And the non-aggression principle doesn't say, I'm just never going to aggress. I may very well choose to aggress against somebody, but I'm also going to accept the responsibility for choosing to aggress against them.
No,
well, I'm just gonna choose to.
Makes it not a principle, but
I'm just gonna choose to enslave and engage in parasitism because I mean I I agree it's unethical, but it's cool. You know, it's fine. I mean, it's my main principle. But
he accepts the ramifications.
Yeah, I might enslave and thrash you into slavery and kill the men and take the women, right? But it's fine because nobody can kill us. I'll band together with other people. I might even form a group. I'll form a group and we'll basically have people like cattle, and then we'll extract money from them like tribute every year. And then,
I mean, if that's what you want to do, but then you're going to be held accountable for your actions.
Yeah, and then we'll call it the state, right? And what I'll do is I'll engage in like suppressing heroin dealers and like limiting the costs imposed upon people. And then it'll be funny. Like I'll meet their demands, and then they'll like demand me almost like I'll have a proper function for my state. You know what I mean?
Well, not if you're out committing crimes.
Yeah. I mean, terrible crimes like stopping heroin dealers from selling to consenting children and, blackmail.
Well, first, you've yet to explain what is wrong with blackmail.
Because it's extortion, pretty much. You want someone to, like, do something, or else you're gonna, like, tell everyone about whatever.
People don't like their
You're using two different definitions of
property or of money.
You said you failed to define what's wrong with extortion, but you're fundamentally not grasping what he's saying. Like his definition of wrong in this instance is not the same as your definition of wrong. He already defined it. He said basically, effectively, he's imposed wrongness as being an imposition of costs.
I'm not imposing a cost.
I think he's arguing the opposite, that you are. If you're a heroin dealer and you're selling heroin to children.
If people think that you're imposing a cost, they will organize to suppress you, right? Because they want to minimize that, and so there is a market demand for the suppression of these sort of activities.
Well, which activity are we talking about? Blackmail or selling heroin to children?
I would argue both. Seeing how people want both to be illegal. They want both to be suppressed. They don't like those activities. They view them as predatory.
So, about blackmail, how is blackmail predatory?
People perceive it as.
Hey, sorry if you can hear the dog in the background.
All good.
It's not too bad.
Well, we're not talking about people's delusional perception. We're talking
about... Well,
actually,
I am, because, like, people consider it, and so there's a demand to, like, suppress people that do that.
There may be a demand for it, but that could be unethical.
Okay.
That could be
we don't care. I demand that someone stop this fucking heroin dealer in my neighborhood, and it's gonna get done, regardless of if you think it's wrong or not.
But just as you would violate the NAP sometime, right? That there's hypotheticals where you would violate the non-aggression principle. There's hypotheticals where we will, and we'll just, suppress parasitism and.
Well, how
is you say parasitism?
Yeah, how is blackmail parasitism?
Because you're preying upon others, right?
How so?
You're trying to find information on people's private life and then extorting them with the threat of releasing that into the commons. And so you're, on the one hand, the whole of people would mean that if I really was a criminal and you're just going to let me get away with it because your own personal gain, that's actually imposing costs upon everyone who wouldn't know I was a criminal. Or if it's just embarrassing, you are now trying to extract money from me with the threat of damaging my property. That's like saying, give me $100 or I'll smash up your car. It's the same thing.
Now you're being...
That's what I mean when I say it depends on the situation, whether or not he did something wrong or embarrassing. Like, if he did something wrong, like, it's questionable whether or not you can really blackmail him. But if he did something embarrassing, yeah, it's extortion.
Blackmail by definition is involving stuff you don't want released, right? I would ask you guys, despite his answer, how is it not parasitic? Like, how is it productive? I guess is the question I'm going for.
He didn't make the claim that it was productive.
Right. But
you're talking about Lethos.
So
it's creating wealth for the blackmailer, right? Like, potentially, or that's the intended outcome. So if it's not productive and it's creating wealth,
blackmail is not a win-win. Yeah, blackmail is not a win-win scenario in which two parties benefit, and it's a win-loss, and you want to minimize your win-loss scenarios. The heroin dealer.
Why are you focused on blackmail?
Well, we need to figure out this blackmail thing, because so far there is a person here who has claimed that blackmail is damaging someone's property. And I would say that person is being disingenuous, because we already dispensed with the notion that a reputation is property. Unless you want to revisit that subject.
I haven't, and I am. Property is that which people defend. They're willing to pay money. They're willing to pay resources, money, time, effort, to defend. That is what property is.
That wouldn't be an accurate definition of property.
Why is it not an accurate definition of property?
Because somebody could pay to defend something that is not their property.
It would be by definition their property if they're willing to defend it.
I think we're talking about something else then.
So I can defend the car that you own, and now your car is mine.
See, now we're getting into the commons, right? Yeah, if we're all paying into a common defense, then yes, all of our property.
That's not what I asked. Don't try to muddy the waters.
Yeah, that's
the commons is nonsense.
I see your car sitting on the side of the road, and I see somebody about to break into it, and I stop them. So now your car is mine?
No.
Okay, so I just dispensed with the notion that the definition of property is something that you will defend. So explain to me how your reputation can possibly be construed as property.
I'm still willing to defend my car if you defend it from another attacker, right? There might be you've created a hazard where we're going to end up disagreeing over who owns the car, and yeah, that would have to be settled by a dispute. But all you're doing is making a claim on the ownership of the car, and we both disagree.
I could address the reputation thing better than that. Like, it's real simple, right?
Yeah.
So, right, your reputation can potentially cause you to gain or lose income, right? And so, while it's not property in and of itself, indirectly, somebody damaging your reputation can cost you money. You would have a valid claim. This is why it's like even under most common law systems, let alone like something like the U.S., which is overblown and all this shit, but just something basic, right? Like common law would be like, you damaged my reputation and it cost me, this deal, this contract that I had, or it cost me this.
And I'll take it one step further and say, not only is it a threat to future profit, but it could also threaten the current value of your property, right? Like if someone tarnishes my reputation and then I'm ostracized from the society, and that causes them to force me out of the property at a lower than market value for my property, like I have to sell, I can't take my lot with me, I have to sell my house, and none of them want to give me fair market value, then I've just lost value on my current property. It's not just future profits.
If they've convinced everybody, then that is the market value if it's gone down to that.
The person sharing the information did not cause a loss of value. It was you engaging in that act. The person, all they did was tell the truth. The only way that
you're assuming that they're telling the truth.
Yeah, we already agreed to discuss only the situations where they are telling the truth about the situation.
Well, or at least one at a time.
Well, I suppose it's really situational even then, right? Because like it's gonna be subjective to the people around you, whether it damages your reputation or maybe brings it up. It'd be something like, this guy's really super religious and it's an atheist community, right? And that would affect your reputation in the atheist community, but in the Christian community next door, they'd love you. So it's kind of it is a very situational thing to say blackmail. You know what I mean?
Well, but even then, if all you're doing is telling the truth, then you're not the one causing injury.
I wasn't suggesting that particular example caused injury. I'm just saying it speaks to the greater point that it's very situational, and that's why blackmail is kind of not the best example.
Because you're breaching their right to privacy. If you think about it, people might not want to discuss like what they do in their personal life, but you on this truth crusade does, and you're impinging on their freedom.
Well, you're using it not
from the rooftops.
Not to like, yeah, you're using it for your own like personal gain at the expense, and it's a win-loss, which is
well, it's not a win-loss.
It is a win-loss.
It's not a violation of someone's privacy because you obtained the information through a way that was available to you.
So it's a win for the person being blackmailed.
Well, if they don't want the information being put out there and they're willing to pay money for it, then yeah, of course it's a win. It's a voluntary exchange.
It's not voluntary though, because you're saying you'd release the information.
Hold on. Blackmail isn't somebody else paying it for it. Blackmail is you pay me so that I do not release this information. That's what
correct.
Blackmail is.
Yeah,
you're
think that's a
suggesting
win-win.
that it's being sold to somebody else, and that's not what blackmail is.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting it is a voluntary exchange. I go to the person, I say, I have this information about you that I happen to see, and I happen to have the ability to record it because you were doing it in public. And so now I'm going to share this information unless you decide to give me some money.
Well, hold on. You just undermined your whole fucking argument. What's public?
Well,
good point.
Yeah, I mean, public is, I would say it's anywhere where you can be seen reasonably without somebody trespassing or committing a crime in order to see it.
So the commons.
Well,
so let's just be explicit here and say, are we in a private property society or are we in a state society?
Wait, doesn't blackmail have a tone of coercion to it? I mean, isn't that the whole point of blackmail?
Would you like me to read the definition?
Yeah.
Very much.
That's what we're trying to illustrate to this guy, but he does not believe that blackmail is.
He gives his philosophy
scenario.
gives licensure to this coercion.
It is a win-lose scenario by definition, right? Like somebody's
oh, he thinks it's a win-win for some reason. I don't know how.
It's voluntary.
Well, you fail to be able to explain how it is a win-lose situation. And you fail to
person's reputation.
I'm losing my money and you're winning my money. Like
well, no, you're
against my will too. I don't want you to expose my information, right? Like you're being predatory.
Why did you reveal the information to me then?
Well, in the example that was illustrated, it was an accident. You overheard it.
In blackmail, you don't usually give. I mean, I guess you could,
but just because you happened to say something in a room where I was able to hear you, or in a location that I was able to hear you, and just because you accidentally did it, that doesn't mean that you did not give me the information.
The information was given to you, but it does not make it. But it's still a win-lose. That's the whole point.
Well, it's not a win-lose. You're agreeing to give me money, and I'm agreeing. I get the money, and you.
I don't think there should be any moral subjectivity on this.
Because all voluntary, because all voluntary exchange has to be okay.
He's he's a weasel. He has been all
like, hey, if it has economic value, it must be therefore moral, right?
Well, no, that's
yeah,
not
you're
it.
You're basically advocating if some girl you know has some nudes that she doesn't want to send to the public, and you go up to her and say, "Hey, bitch, if you don't fuck me right now, then I'm gonna show your nudes to everyone you know."
Even though she gave them to you voluntarily.
Hey, that's voluntary though.
Yeah, that's fucked up, dude.
That's voluntary, Kel.
You're literally opening the door like, no, revenge porn, that's fine.
Or I was thinking if one company threatens another company like, hey, I'm going to expose how your product's made if you don't let me buy your company or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's a little different, though.
The guy's using pill pull. He's a weasel, a nihilist, a reductionist, and he doesn't stand for anything because he's afraid to. Because if he did stand for something, then we could pick it apart like his little bullshit he's trying to do with everything we bring in. Everything.
No, I stand for things. I'm asking you to support your claim that there is something wrong with blackmail. So where is the coercion? You obtained the information. It was given to you voluntarily.
I think the naked pictures thing and the have sex with me is actually the best fucking example of why that would be immoral. When you take money out of it and you just put it like that, you're essentially saying, let me rape you or I'm going to put your pictures out. That's a win-lose.
Well, one cannot let you rape them. First off.
Well, no, I'm gonna have to agree with that just definitionally, but there.
It was beseeched by her whims. She didn't want it.
Isn't the whole point of blackmail doing something under the pretext of being coerced? I mean,
Would you like the
that doesn't make it voluntary.
Well, I failed.
Hey there, it's not rape there. Don't worry.
Doesn't coercion imply
both agreed to this.
physical violence?
This is
if you're claiming that that is the definition of blackmail, then so far the situations that you have described are not blackmail.
Yeah, they are, because the Oxford Dictionary definition of blackmail is the action treated as a criminal offence of demanding money from someone in return for not revealing compromising information which one has about them. Demanding money from someone in return for not revealing the information.
Because it's a threat. It's a form of threat.
I mean, think about it, right? Let's say someone overheard something in a bar. That wouldn't be black, because it's like public information. It's if you go and, like I say, you're breaching the right to privacy.
How am I breaching someone's right to privacy if I obtain the information from them in a non-private manner?
Okay, but what's non-private in a private property society, if that's the framework we're talking about here?
Well, doesn't that just come down again to, do you own ideas in other people's heads? Or do you own words?
I mean, this kind of gets into, like, again, like I said, like 2 hours ago, like, our society, like Western civilization, like we kind of figured out a lot of this shit, and there's like reasonable expectations and all these sort of legal standards that already exist for fucking reasons.
Well, except the only problem with this system is it is a coercive
States
system.
don't exist, dude.
Oh, wait, so now you have a problem with coercion? Get the fuck out of here.
Well,
look, blackmail does not have a threat of violence. States do put out threats of violence, physical.
It may be violent. It may be effectively violent.
The
It may
problem
not be me
with that
Wait
state.
a second, bro. Wait a second. Let me finish my fucking sentence. It may not be me imposing the threat of violence, but if I cause an ostracization of someone because of the society that could lead to violence, or
a pitchfork mob.
Or a pitchfork mob, or could cause them to starve to death because no one will sell them anything.
The only thing I wanted
to right?
Only thing I wanted to point out is this guy. You were just saying that states impose violence, but this guy literally doesn't believe states exist. So how can that be?
I never claimed that states impose
yes,
violence.
you did. That's exactly what you said. Verbatim.
That is not verbatim exactly what I said.
Or you could blackmail someone to where they lose their job and therefore their economic sustainability and lose everything that they have. So indirectly,
I have a really quick point, which is that the point you made about it's not physical violence that the other fella made. See, this is the point I was trying to point out. It's okay because it's not physical violence. It's not like physically coming to harm your person or your direct, like, the things you directly own. Therefore, it's okay. Therefore, we give licensure to it. Therefore, everyone should be free to engage in that activity. That was what I was trying to point out.
Sell heroin to children.
Yeah.
Well, first let's discuss. Go ahead.
There's a perfect example of how blackmail can be a threat, right? So, I fucked your wife, right? And somebody finds out about it, and they say, I'm going to tell so-and-so unless you pay me, and you find out that I fucked your wife, you're going to fucking kill me, right? Like a lot of people would. You know what I mean?
So let's talk about that situation now. So explain to me
Let's talk about me fucking your wife. Okay.
Continue, please.
How did the person acquire the information?
Yeah, it's tough to say. The problem is as the blackmailee, right? Not the blackmailer, but the blackmailee, you might not even know how this person acquired the information.
Right, but that could very well be true. However, the issue, the thing that would make it potentially coercion or aggression would be determined by how the person acquired the information in the first place.
What? No, but it's just the very fact that you're telling someone that they have to give you money so you won't tell anybody this information. That's the whole coercion part.
I think it's really funny that you basically like you're just clinging on to like you're defending the NAP like vigorously, but like everyone I've ever heard defend the NAP is like really explicit to include coercion inside of the definition of the NAP. Right?
I do too, but you have yet to explain a situation where there is coercion in this situation.
Well, it's coercion because I know, right? I am in a bind here. I fucked your wife, and I know if you find out about it, you own a lot of guns, right? And you're a very jealous guy, let's say, right? And so I know you're gonna fucking kill me. And so if I don't pay this money, I'm going to die. That's coercion.
Well, so explain.
It's the pretense of a threat. Whether that threat has physical consequences or other consequences.
So explain to me how it is that the person who is saying, I will take money from you and not give information that was freely given to them by someone who knew already, that they didn't have to steal the information, they didn't have to spy on you.
Let's just say it was on
coercion's subjective, but aggression is not.
Let's just say it was found on the internet. Like I found a video on Pornhub or whatever.
So somehow this video ended up on Pornhub, and all you're saying is, I'm going to let your husband know that this happened if you don't give me money, right?
Yep.
Okay, how is that coercion?
That's like the definition of coercion.
How so?
We keep coming into these situations where like you're like, how is that this? And then we're like, dude, that's the definition of this.
Because
like,
you're putting a person in a position where they're forced to avoid having their livelihood ruined.
Well, they put themselves.
Can I ask a very simple question here. Has any one of you, apart from some of the debaters here, actually read a dictionary? Because we seem to be like defining terms here that are really easily findable, putting on terms.
That's the problem with every single.
Okay, here it is. The practice of persuading someone to do something by using force or threats. Like literally verbatim what we're describing.
Right. It's essentially a threat.
And so they're saying,
you say it's essentially
if you find out
a threat.
I fucked your wife, you're gonna kill me. That's what the guy's saying. You gotta pay me, or I'm gonna tell him, and I know he's gonna fucking kill you. That's coercion.
Well, if you can say, I know the person is going to kill you, then yeah, you're threatening. But if you're just saying, I have this information and I'm willing to accept money in order
to
the
Jewish route. Got it.
That's what we said like an hour ago.
Oh yeah, dude, this guy.
So why do you think this person would want to pay money to not have this information released?
Genetically from Israel.
You're very nasally there. Oh god, you found me out. Oh.
Is there a reason you haven't let me finish the sentence before you start to ridicule and laugh?
Because it's funny.
Well, okay.
Because
so
I
you're
can't.
Not gonna let,
what are you gonna do?
I don't want to hear this out.
Are you going to allow me to finish the sentence or not?
What if we said?
Please continue. No, please continue.
Okay. If there is no coercion, is
I mean,
a very
there's no
specific
force
thing.
in me not letting you to finish.
Let him
So
finish.
it's
Let him
perfectly
finish.
fine.
Let him finish, please. So
there
is you're. God damn it. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So if we're going to discuss coercion is a very specific thing. It is a threat of force. A threat is a declaration of an intention or determination to inflict punishment. So if you are threatening somebody, then that's one thing. But if all you're saying is, I'm going to share this information if you don't give me money, that is not a threat. There is no force.
Well, why would that person give you money then in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say. I mean, let's come on. Like, it wouldn't be a valuable piece of information if it wasn't understood. Like, you wouldn't even bother to try to coerce them in that way if it wasn't something that Like, if there was no consequence for the information coming out, they just simply wouldn't pay you.
If both
and you wouldn't
people
even bother.
involved were already porn stars and everybody already knew, then why would you be getting money for anything?
If I
Right.
fucked your wife in a free society, who else but you would care, right?
Well, the issue is this is information that was freely given.
Hey, have you ever
It
thought
doesn't matter
about
how
selling
you
your
acquired
wife
the
to your
information, although that
friends?
could make it worse.
Move
It's
the
just the fact that
goalpost
Well,
there's an economic value for this person to not want to have this information released.
You keep you keep listening to one sentence and then you interrupt before I can ever finish to get to the conclusion. So I'm trying to lay out premises followed by conclusion. If you want to allow me to lay out the premises and then hear the conclusion, and then if you want to try to poke holes in that, then I'm going to ask
If you want to do that, I would highly suggest not waiting like 15 seconds in between, because then everybody thinks you're done.
Well, I don't. I finished the sentence and then got interrupted.
I think you're just using it as an excuse because you're monotoning, you're droning on. Like right now, you're just trying to buy time. How about you just say it?
No. What I'm saying is information was freely given about somebody who had sex with someone's wife. And so
you're making an assumption there too.
Yeah, let him finish. We already figured out the fucking the attributes of the situation.
So again, the information was given that you had sex with somebody's wife. That information is out there on the internet and you found it. So what could possibly be wrong with saying, there's no threat. It's me saying, if it's worth it to you to give me this amount of money so I don't share this information, then I will take this amount of money so I do not share this information.
Well, that's still a threat.
Wait.
How is that a threat?
I have two things here. Okay, so the first is it's going to be a little bit hard for me to bring it up verbatim because this was like 2 or 3 hours ago but I'm using your argument here. So your argument earlier was it actually depends on how the information was originally obtained, right? Like if the person who, let's say it was a video, right? So a person snuck onto my property and illegally, or for lack of a better term, trespassed on my property and filmed into my bedroom and saw this guy fucking my wife, and then he put it up on the internet.
Yeah, they did it wrong.
Your argument 2 hours ago would have been that even though the guy who's extorting the person now is not coercion or not aggression or whatever, it still would be because the information was originally gotten through ill-gotten means.
It doesn't matter in the sense that the information we got. The law states that it's with threats. So it wasn't coercion.
Well, we all understand that, but
yeah. But
I'm sorry.
Our friend on the panel doesn't seem to understand it because he seems to be stuck in this idea that it's okay.
It doesn't even have to be the snuck on the property thing, right? I can find it easier and a not aggressive one, right? Like that information was freely given, but not by me, right?
It doesn't matter how WikiLeaks got the emails. It's the fact that the emails are true.
Well, your wife was secretly recording, right? And so she put the thing on Pornhub without my knowledge or consent.
Yeah, so she aggressed in that situation, most likely. But the issue is you keep on blaming the person who is saying they will accept money not to share the information when it was you that did the action that you don't want out there. Well, it does matter because you did the action and you allowed other people to know about it.
Come on, say it. I fucked your wife. Come on, it makes it more entertaining. Jesus.
Well, I mean, the action itself is irrelevant. It's just you did the action, and you don't want it out in public, so you shouldn't have allowed people to know about it.
You have no right to stop someone.
Wait, so 2 wrongs make a right? Is that what you're saying?
What do you mean 2 wrongs make a right? Where are the 2 wrongs?
I thought someone was suggesting because someone did something wrong in the first place, therefore if they're being threatened, it isn't wrong.
That's what the guy said.
Unless I misunderstood.
Well, the non-aggression principle, would lead you to, you have no reason to stop your wife from having sex with another man.
This is why I'll
because it's just voluntary exchange. I mean, it might ruin your marriage. It might.
Oh, especially if you get a good trade. Like if you trade some fucking organic chard for your fucking wife's pussy. I mean, come on, dude. That sounds like a free society to me.
Well, let's reframe this a little bit, right? Because I have a good one here. So instead of this information was thrown out the window, I fucked your wife, and then I said, I'm going to tell your husband. And if you don't pay me, I'm going to tell him.
You tell that to the wife?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
That's still coercion.
How is it coercion?
Because you're still threatening to release information that could potentially ruin someone's life and have all these negative consequences, right?
Well, how is that a threat?
Because you by saying that you're going to reveal the information when it weren't revealed before, right? It doesn't matter if it's true or not.
So he only ascribes a threat to direct physical violence, apparently.
No, not physical violence necessarily. Injury.
Okay. So
that's a start.
Yeah, but the fact that you're out of pocket is injury. The fact that you're paying a penny to a blackmailer is injury in that sense.
Where is the injury?
Well, the injury
the fact that you're losing money.
The injury is one of two things. She's either going to pay so that information stays secret, or she's going to potentially lose her entire marriage, be divorced.
Yeah, not to mention the implications for potential children and what their fucking life is gonna be, the hell that their life is gonna be after that. That's a fucking hell of a cost.
Yeah, well, but so we have to look at the cause, because it is not you giving the information that ends up being the cause of all that. It is the action itself. So
no,
all it is,
it's objectively you giving the information that is the cause of that. I mean, yes, I agree that the initial thing is bad, but that doesn't mean that just giving it after the fact is also like it's just.
You're gonna have to let me finish, because
go ahead.
If it's a voluntary exchange, I can walk into Walmart and decide to buy something or not. So just like I can say, I will buy your silence on this matter, or I will choose not to. This is
it is under duress, though. That's the point.
Oh yes, under duress is a good point.
Where is the duress?
I just want to point out the fact that I was in your position arguing these arguments 5 years ago. I just point that out.
Irrelevant. I'm still asking you, where is the duress?
Walmart's a voluntary transaction where you're willing to buy a product for money. This isn't. It's whereby I'm going to release this if you don't pay me. Walmart never says if you don't buy this, well, war betide you. That's the difference.
I mean, the very intent of it is malignant.
It's
right?
It's still a voluntary transaction.
It's not a voluntary transaction in the sense of this person, again, under extreme duress, do you think this person is going to make just a very calm decision?
If I point a gun at your head and say, give me money, that's a voluntary transaction. You just gave me money.
Well, no. There is a threat of violence there.
And there's a threat of violence in a couple of the scenarios that I've put forth, but you've ignored it.
I keep asking you specifically, where is the threat of violence? And you have yet to be able to say where it is.
I said
what I think I can see he's saying is that directly from the person who's, I guess, asking for money, if they're not right, if the person that's asking for money is saying, oh, if you don't give me the money, I'm going to do this, then there's the threat. But if they don't say that, they just say, give me money or I'm going to tell on you, then there's really no
it's only a threat enough to get money, but not a threat enough that anyone would actually get hurt. Is that the argument that you're making?
That's not the argument that I'm making. I'm trying to point out that it seems like that's what he's directly saying about the fact that from what you guys are more or less saying compared to what he's trying to get at.
Yeah, so it's threaty enough to be economically viable, but not threaty enough that any negative consequences would occur.
I'm not agreeing with anything. I'm just trying to point out.
Here's the quintessential example. Hey, this is a nice storefront you got here, buddy. It would be a shame if someone were to come by and break the windows every week. Why don't you pay me And I'll make sure that doesn't happen, fam. I'll make sure it doesn't happen. I got some dudes. Oh, is that not coercion? Is that not? I mean,
right, but aren't you pointing out that you're gonna cause damage or you're gonna?
No.
Or you could say to a company,
hey, the forces of nature are uncontrollable. It's a feral world out there. It would be a shame. It would be a shame if someone were to come by and break these beautiful windows you got here, buddy.
Would be a shame if I gave the recipe to your cookies to another company that also has cookies.
But let's focus.
That would be a shame.
Let's focus on the Windows thing, right?
That's
if you're saying the Windows thing, right, and you're saying that, let's just say you're threatening me, or you're saying that you're possibly there's a possibility. Just listen. You're saying that there's a possibility that if I don't give you a certain amount of money, that Windows could be broken, right? You're not saying that you're directly going to do it, but you're saying there's a possibility, right? So now that puts me in a position.
To go back.
That means that I'm in a position to either listen or not. So now I have to understand that my choice is going to deal with the consequence. So if I don't give you money and you end up breaking Windows, I'm going to come to the assumption that because you mentioned it, I'm supposed to. That leads me to believe that it was you. Doesn't mean that it is.
Well,
but that's a whole nother.
It's called an implication, which is the same thing that we're fucking trying to point out with the. If you don't you're gonna pay me, or I'm gonna tell your fucking crazy ass husband about you cheating. Like it's the same implication. Fucking it's simple shit, guys. Implication.
No, it's not. We're not discussing the implication. You're comparing apples to oranges in that scenario.
Implication is what makes it economically valuable, right?
I laid out the implication is the only reason it's worth money.
Again, let's say everyone knew that person was a porn star and had seen the material. Supply and demand. There would be no need for that information to be exposed.
Okay, but you're ignoring what I said. Implication is not the issue at hand.
Even through this dude's philosophy, you can just tell he's just a slimy little fuck that just doesn't.
I think under duress is the best argument.
Well, you have yet to explain where the duress is present.
The duress is because she's facing all these negative consequences. She's not going to be in the right state of mind to make a calm decision of, oh yeah, no, it's not a big deal. I just won't do it.
But you're not the one that is causing the duress. She caused the duress through her action and through the consequences of that information becoming known.
That doesn't mean that someone has a right to threaten blackmail.
There is no threat.
There's totally a threat.
Where
this is
you have yet
stuff,
to,
people.
You have yet to explain the threat.
The threat is
in
lieu of coercion and being under duress.
The threat is the only the threat of some kind of damage is the only reason that it is valuable information to you to keep from that person spreading around.
You are not the one causing the damage. You are not the one doing.
You're starting the ball rolling and potentially causing the damage.
Well, I would make an addendum to that you're not starting the ball. You're pushing the ball faster and faster. It's already rolling a little bit, but you're like speeding it up.
How so?
I'm making money off it.
Not only is he pushing the ball, but he's going to rape a woman because he's got these.
This is a total aside. Total aside. Would you consider yourself a feminist? Would you consider yourself a feminist? Buddy?
Oh no! Don't start.
I need to hear the answer to this.
What do you mean by a feminist?
Oh God.
Yes no, it's not worth it.
Yes or no?
Do you have any certain definition of that word that you would say you are?
I just think you're a rapist. All right.
So, I mean, if you're just gonna laugh, and I thought you guys wanted civil discourse.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Okay,
fair point. Civil discourse. Wait a minute. I want to ask you a personal and honest question, Lepos. Hear me out on this. Are you unable to discern the intentions of someone unless they actually spell it outright to you?
I'm sorry. Ask that question again.
Are you, regarding the wife and all of that blackmail stuff, are you unable to discern the intention of someone unless they actually outright state it to you?
Frequently, well, I don't know. I've never been in that sort of a situation, but I'm generally able to discern the intentions of people.
then you agree that the implications do matter. Like if someone says it would be a shame if this particular thing would or wouldn't happen, you would be able to discern that they are likely to be the ones who want to produce damage to you or your property or friends or whatever else.
Well, in the case of the mafia fire insurance salesman, yes, you as long as I'm able to collect evidence that is their intention, then yes.
Look, fuck evidence for a bit. Evidence can easily be forged. People who are pedophiles and who are in high-ranking members circles of society literally have no evidence because they have people who want to prosecute them have literally little to no evidence because they cannot produce it because that evidence is clearly hidden from the public. Therefore, there is literally no evidence for that action having occurred, but it did actually happen. So basing something on evidence that is, just from the information available is kind of a moot point because you kind of need to use your intuition every now and then. And I do mean genuine intuition.
So are you proposing that we prosecute people based upon thought crime?
Circumstantial evidence is used in court.
No, I'm saying that the court is fundamentally hypocritical and bullshit because it's created by a class of parasites. I'm not saying we should prosecute it. I was using it as an example for the argument that I was trying to make.
I'm not, okay, so to clarify, I'm not discussing the current coercive court system. I'm discussing
He's using it as an example,
criminal prosecution.
Right. Well, just to be fair, right? Like evidence can come, like if you want specifically physical evidence, that's one thing. Circumstantial evidence, which in the terms of a court has one meaning, but I think generally speaking, most people would be like, oh, the circumstances seem suspicious, right? That's a form of evidence.
I would agree.
It's not a nail in the coffin, right? Obviously, it's like
but a preponderance of it can be.
Yeah, and that doesn't just go in like the current court system. That's just kind of how people interact with the world around them. So like, you could have evidence that's physical evidence that's a slam dunk, but you could also have all kinds of other. Well, he was at this place. He was at that time.
There was no one else there.
Yeah.
We have proof that there was no one else there. We can't prove he did it, but he was the only one there, et cetera, right?
Yeah, so there is a burden of proof in order to criminally prosecute people, yes.
What's a preponderance of evidence in that case?
Well, I mean, it would depend upon what system you're a part of, but
so the circumstances.
Well, we're in Western civilization currently, so.
Currently under the current Western civilization system, there is no criminal prosecution. It's all civil, according to their rules.
Okay. Well, this isn't anything to do with the court system, right? In the case of the fire insurance salesman, right? Circumstantially, what he's saying to you sounds like he might be sending some goons to come break your windows or burn your store down if you don't pay him. Now, he didn't directly say that. As a matter of fact, he said the opposite. He said how bad it would be, right? So
so he's imposing violence. He's imposing a threat of violence.
No, he's objectively not. He's saying empathetically and with all concern in his heart, it would be really terrible if something were to happen to your beautiful windows, my friend.
We're not a veiled threat.
We're not talking about the manner in which he speaks and the words that he says. We're talking about the entirety of what
so now you understand implications.
Well, I always did understand implications.
Well, you don't in the sense of blackmail, so.
You don't in everything we've talked about, but okay.
No, I understand implications in the sense of blackmail. What I'm saying is
good. Then it's resolved.
Again, allow me to finish a sentence.
Never.
Because
I allow through people sometimes, my dude. Like that's the way the internet works and shit. Like you just gotta talk through people.
You gotta remember there's like lag and there's like instances where like you're not talking and people aren't intentionally trying to just step over you most of the time.
Well, okay, so that person did though.
Because it's just worth interjecting over top of people, and you can do it too. And it's a shit show sometimes, but welcome to the internet, my dude.
Yeah.
And also, there isn't just you in this server as well. There's a full room of people who might want to talk as well. So, young lad, let other people speak. So, continue, group.
Yeah, but the problem
would be ashamed to get talked over.
If you are attempting to have civil discourse, then you've got to, before you respond to a sentence, you have to allow the person to finish the sentence. So that you know.
Don't hurt my feelings, please. Oh,
Stop
God.
victimizing yourself. Let us and get on with the point.
Yeah,
I'm not
get off the cross and tell us what you were gonna say.
I'm not victimizing myself. It's just you are inhibiting the conversation.
That'd be ironic. Another Jew on a cross.
You're inhibiting the conversation because you're responding to something that I am not saying. So what I'm saying is,
say it.
Okay, well, hopefully I can do so without interruption. So what I'm saying is, if, like, I fully comprehend the implication and whatnot. What I'm saying is the implication is not the issue that causes coercion to occur in what you are terming blackmail. So
the fire insurance salesman, then, he's implying, but he actually doesn't come down and break the windows. He doesn't even order people, right? He just gives them a list of, hey, these are the places that didn't pay, and they know what to do. So he's really not doing anything wrong.
Well, he is. He's imposing a threat of violence.
No, he's not. He's just giving his guys a list of these are the people that don't pay the insurance, and they do what they see fit.
It's clear that he's imposing a threat of violence. As long as I can prove that he is imposing a threat of violence, there is the issue of, if I don't pay, then this gets destroyed. And that is a threat of violence. In the situation that you're talking about where I sell the notion that I will not give information about you fucking my wife, or me fucking your wife, which is information that I obtained by doing the ad.
No. You're not fucking any wives, all right?
Well,
let him go. Let him go.
So, if I fuck your wife, and I tell you, or I tell the wife,
I was going to say, if you fucked my wife and then told me, there would be no threat of violence, you would just get killed.
I don't think I'd believe him at first, to be honest.
Mine doesn't like circumcised dicks anyway, so...
No, I get what you're saying, though. Like, you just kind of misspoke. I get it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I tell her that I'm going to release this information to the public unless you decide to give me money. There is no coercion there. There's no...
What's the unless? No. The scenario is I'm going to tell your husband.
And it's under duress.
I'm going to tell your husband, not I'm going to tell the public. You found the video on the internet already or whatever. I'm going to tell your husband that I fucked your wife. Or whatever, fucking... Okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. But well, you get me, fam. You get me, fam.
Dan Capistan, you can have both a husband and a wife at the same time.
So regardless of who you decide to tell,
so if the stateless society is all swingers, then there would be no economic value in anyone sharing information.
Problem solved.
Well, this is Ancomistan, and we must redistribute the means of reproduction, so I get to fuck your wife.
Okay,
right?
makes perfect sense.
Yeah, redistribution of wealth through blackmail, it seems.
No, redistribution of pussy through blackmail. That's what we're doing here.
So am I learning here that you guys aren't actually anarchists?
I'm not.
I'm an anarchist.
I'm a minarchist.
I'm a minarchist. I was for many years I was an ANCAP, but I consider myself a minarchist. I think it's preferable to minimize the size and scope of the state for the reasons of minimizing, potential corruption and things. But yeah, ultimately, I kind of accept that there's going to be.
I also think that mafia should be whittled down.
That there's going to be. I accept that there's going to be some fucking organizational structure that you could loosely call a state. So, yeah.
Okay. That's conceding then.
Well,
and closer to anything, it would be proprietarianism. But I'm not even going to say that I am one, because I don't understand the arguments as thoroughly as would need be.
So the one who says he's a minarchist. So where is the line that it is okay to coerce somebody?
Well, that implies that I believe in the NAP.
Look, just briefly, I want to get back to the point of why that wife situation is coercion. And to put it simply, basically the blackmailer is offering, or rather is making it seem like he's offering the wife a choice between two negatives, not two positives. You see, the choice is between two negatives, not something that is beneficial to her.
And one of them is by definition worse than the other.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the coercion.
How is it not a positive to have the person remain silent?
Because you're paying a bunch of fucking money. It costs money, bro. It's like I don't just generally give away like $10,000 like for free to anyone.
Generally speaking, with blackmail, you're gonna ask for a lot of money, right? You're not gonna ask for just a little bit.
Look, in case of a blackmail, every choice that the wife takes ends up at a loss for her, compared to there not being that situation in the first place.
In other words, imposing costs, like we've been saying for hours.
But you're not imposing a cost.
You are imposing.
How are you not imposing a cost? Oh my goodness!
You're imposing two decisions that both come at a cost. One is a monetary cost, and one is a potentially life-shattering, uncalculable cost.
I do agree that the best way to avoid that situation was for her not to sleep with somebody in the first place.
Oh, absolutely.
But two wrongs don't make it right. I mean, because that's implying that someone had it coming if they did something wrong, and that's not helpful.
Right.
Well, no, I don't think that's implying it at all. And the notion that two wrongs don't make a right don't really apply to that situation.
Well, even still, I would just say, like, I am fully in support of the responsibility part of the argument, but people do make mistakes. People do bad things. People, people are human, right? And so then you're taking their humanity and profiting off of it, and their failings as a person and profiting off of it at great cost to them, one way or the other, like a large sum of money, or their entire life being upended.
And it doesn't matter the amount of money; it's still coercion.
Why? So you're claiming that a person who gives information to another has a right to control how they use that information?
No, I'm saying I'd have him arrested because I'm a filthy statist.
Well, no, I'm asking you. So if you are saying that if I obtain information, that you have the right to control what I do with that information.
No,
I have
right?
the distinct impression that this conversation is going in circles, at least with regards to this particular topic about coercion. I want to get back to this.
It's not just this topic; it's this whole person.
It's been every topic, but we can move topics. I think that would be entertaining.
Let's talk about the square circle thing, and I'm not saying this sarcastically.
Fuck the square circle.
No. I'm serious. I get the joke about it, but I'm serious. I'm actually meaning it in a serious tone. I mean, technically, let's give credit where it's due, and you can feel free to disagree with this if you want to disagree with it or whatever. But Lefos does have a point when he says that everything is possible, in the sense that everything is infinite potential. But I think he doesn't actually know what he's talking about, so that's why he is just using the words without getting the meaning behind them. So therefore, he can't get the point across in a cohesive way.
That was savage.
Why savage?
I think he knows.
I
think he knows what he's talking about. He has his own kind of.
Look, it's like kind of the difference between actual spirituality and pseudo spirituality, if you get my point.
Right. And I come at it from a polar opposite position, whereas I don't believe in the NAP as such. I believe in the NART, the non-aggression rule of thumb. I believe that non-aggression is the optimal outcome most of the time, except for the times when it's not.
Well, it's funny when you bring that question up in a spiritual sense. The first thing that comes to mind is like, can Jesus heat up a burrito so hot that he can't eat it? It's literally the same thing, right? Like, yeah. I mean, it's the same fucking thing.
Let me put it to you like this: if you were locked into a jail cell, how would your spirituality get you out of that cage? Is it going to turn you into a keyhole? No, you're fucked.
Technically, there is such a thing as
meditation in an existential sense.
Who is discussing spirituality and why?
He was referring to spirituality only in the sense of like the different interpretations of the same thing.
No, when I say spirituality in this particular context, I mean actual reality warping through power of will, so to speak, to put it in words.
Oh, are you talking about like the law of attraction or reality being subjective?
No, that's technically still within the. I mean, to use the analogy, I think it's kind of an overused analogy, but anyway, it's kind of like natural law or the law of attraction or whatever else. It's kind of like you look at a video game, and the developer code of the video game is technically the natural law of that video game. What I'm saying when I'm talking about spirituality in this context is basically recognizing that we are the developer of the game, so to speak, and all of the characters within the game and the game itself, both natural law and everything that is, well, within the game, is technically our creation, and it's a role play for us as the infinite spirit, so to speak.
Oh yeah, so the world we see is a projection of our collective unconscious. I can totally agree with that, because right now, statism exists because humanity perceives it hating itself.
Are you saying Lefos is an NPC?
He's referring
not
to the
exactly, not exactly an NPC. I mean, he does. I mean, you Lefos do express some level of consciousness, but you're also apparently attached to your beliefs. That's the problem, and you don't know how to find harmony between what you believe and what you, on an intuitive level, I suppose you know, perhaps.
So
yeah, I agree with that, but those are kind of different topics, sort of that relate to each other.
Well, and if I may respond to that, there's not anything that I rely on belief for. I am fully aware of what you are speaking about in terms of the nature of reality, and what probably the closest thing that I was a little uncomfortable in referring to as natural law, because I prefer to keep these things just amongst certain people. However, I am aware of what appear to be laws that define the nature of reality. So I'm aware of what you're speaking of, and I don't.
You want to keep natural.
You want to keep things amongst
people.
Oh, damn it!
What people?
Let him finish. Let him finish. No, seriously.
His tribe. His tribe. Continue.
Would be a shame.
I find that some knowledge to share with others is irresponsible.
Why?
Hold on, you're the one that said it's not
I want to see where this goes.
Coercive information in terms of blackmail, and now you think it's irresponsible to share information?
Only with your tribe. I mean, you can't do it to the tribe. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
tribalism would still exist without a state, unfortunately.
You can't talk about the volcano demon.
Let Lefos say what he has to say. Seriously, this conversation might be a point in his journey in this life, supposedly.
I like this.
Yeah, I mean, I hope to continue to be able to have the conversation without much ridicule, but I mean, I seriously want to have civil discourse here.
That is a pertinent point. However, it is their freedom to ridicule you if they so choose, freedom of speech and all that. It is also your freedom to react to it however you will, either in the sense of being a pussy and saying, "Oh no, they're ridiculing me," or in a conscious sense and not giving a shit and continuing to express your words regardless.
In fairness, we do that to each other, man. Like, that's what we do. We banter. It's fine. We're not meaning to hurt your feelings.
It's a sign of affection and acceptance.
So let me explain one thing about the interruption process that I think you guys are missing the point on, because it is not about my feelings. I could care less about my feelings and the fact that you are even interrupting. All I care about is efficiency of time, and the fact that if you interrupt, then I feel like you guys are missing something that I feel like could be incredibly valuable for y'all.
How long have you guys been having this conversation?
3 hours.
Too long.
That's not very efficient use of time. You could be out there.
So Lefos, if efficiency is your concern, why do you not speak plainly?
I do.
But you kept going around in circles at various points throughout the whole conversation.
You can't bring logic to an emotional gunfight.
I would say I'm not bringing the circles around. I would say that the people that I'm talking to are creating the circles.
To have his back for a minute, I do feel that he does speak plainly.
You weren't here in the whole conversation. I've been here the whole time.
Yeah, you haven't.
It took me literally 25 minutes. It took me literally 25 minutes to get him to admit that, to just say the phrase that not everything is possible, and I had
You
to
haven't been
force
here
him.
for 3
I had to
gruesome
coerce him
hours.
to do it by using the square circle example.
Now,
and
to be fair, Risky, you did also show some form of cognitive dissonance and ignorance throughout the discourse as well, such as particularly the there is such a thing as impossibility thing. That's, I mean, you're basically in that particular context like a blind man refusing to acknowledge the potential of light just because you've never seen it or have never recalled or remembered it.
I reject that, but that's okay.
I'm not trying to shit on your opinion. I'm just expressing my own and whatever.
I will stand by my statement that there are things in the universe which are impossible.
Well, and that's exactly why you will never experience anything that is beyond that.
Okay.
Dude, you're gonna have like 80 years probably at most on this earth. Don't say shit like that. I mean, come on.
I'm fine with accepting that I'm not going to see anything beyond reality, so that's cool.
Yeah, can you live in your current body, in your current manifestation, infinitely, forever?
If we were conscious enough to express that spiritual ability on a physical level as well, fuck yeah.
Well,
that doesn't make any sense. That seems contradictory, but okay.
Well,
Entropy would disagree with you.
That's actually relative to what point of reference we're using, because technically, if you try to explain the concept of light to a blind man using a blind man's terminology, it's not going to make sense from that perspective.
Right, but
does
we have this thing
reincarnation
called
count or no?
We have this thing called objective standards, and no, because that's also not objectively quantifiable.
You want to hear my
science, which relies upon objective, measurable standards, and according to that, the universe will burn out, and in about 10 or 15 billion years, blah 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 blah, et cetera. We can't live forever.
I want to answer his
blind
man comment. I want to answer your blind man comment. The way I make a blind man see, if he can't see the light, is just take a giant club and like beat him over the head until he figures it out.
That's definitely coercion.
So I want
maybe
to
maybe so.
Rap.
I want to address the person who is saying regarding an objective perception of science, or what were the words that you used?
Define objective, by the way.
There is an objective reality, and we model it by measuring things and having the ability to reproduce those measurements from multiple subjective points of view, and that's the definition of objectivity, right?
So basically, objectivism is a commonly accepted subjective point of view.
No,
yes.
Yeah, you're conflating things which are literally opposites, but okay.
Not quite, because technically, let's look at a particular situation. Let's say a superficial example, but
I really don't want to hear the word quantum anywhere in this fucking sentence. Continue.
Basically, let's say we're in an ice cream shop. Of course, superficial example, but try to look at the meaning. You have a few people who do not like vanilla ice cream, but like chocolate ice cream. The majority, however, does like.
Getting racist.
No, I get the implication.
Do they have Superman ice cream?
I'm objectively a racist. That's a fact. Continue. Sorry.
Right. Continuing on with the example. So, some people like the majority likes vanilla ice cream. The majority likes chocolate ice cream. Right. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that quote unquote objectively vanilla ice cream is better? Fuck no, it doesn't.
No,
but it might.
No, but it is a fact that objectively the majority prefers vanilla.
But one thing that you're doing is you're assuming that the human perception is an objective perception.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm not at all. And remember, like 2 hours ago, when I was like, "You're just a subjectivist." This is what I meant.
Well,
so
I
saw this shit coming. I saw this shit coming fucking miles away, bro.
You guys, that one guy does sound like Terrence McKenna. I just want to point that out.
Hold on, I just want to say, when we're talking about ice creams and preferences of ice creams, it's of no consequence, okay?
No,
It's a little bit of sweetness on your tongue.
I was using the example metaphorically. Look, to give a more proper.
About having a society of whites or blacks, that is got real consequences.
No, it's not. I wasn't trying.
A country full of niggers. You better lock your doors, motherfucker, because they're coming.
Pugs, how are you so quick to dismiss his argument?
Continue. That was
entirety.
Okay, to give a more real world example, as it were, you say that something is objective if it is measurable, correct?
No, the definition of objective is that it is measurable and reproducible, and therefore that is outside of the purview of a subjective agent, right? Like, I'm not relying on my subjective perception of some phenomena when I can measure it, and then with some instrument.
You're saying it's empirical.
It's reproducible. It's empirical. Yes, exactly.
Then how do you reproduce or measure something if you do not perceive it?
Well, how do we transmit internet from fucking here to space and back? Do it.
How do you?
It's called instrumentation, dude. It's physics. Like physics.
How do you measure radiation? How do you measure radiation at Chernobyl if you can't see it? Well, there's tools that they use.
That wasn't.
How do you measure like radio waves? Well, we can do it.
To be fair, that wasn't his question, though. His question was, how do you measure something that you cannot perceive?
You use an instrument.
You use an instrument that does perceive.
What if you have no conception whatsoever of that particular thing that you are supposedly trying to quantify?
Yeah, because
this has happened in history, guys. This has happened. This has happened with radio waves. This has happened with radiation. We didn't have a conception of something, and we had an instrument that by chance picked up some peripheral consequence of that thing, and we said, why is this happening? I can't see what's causing it. And then they look more and they study and they find out what the fucking thing is.
Right, because the sense of perception can be limited.
To clarify,
that's the whole point of science, is that human perception is flawed, but that's why you measure and reproduce. Like, this is so basic.
To clarify, because I feel as though I have a very effective discourse on this. So to clarify, the use of an instrument allows you to perceive something. So what we may be referring to, or what he may be referring to, are things that cannot be perceived through instrumentation.
No.
Thank you, Terrence McKenna.
No, let's say you have the example of these goggles that you see infrared that the normal human eye doesn't. You put those goggles on your face and you get that 5 sense interpretation of what the goggle picks up. What if you didn't have that interpretation that the goggles showed you at all?
Well, then you wouldn't see it. But that doesn't mean that those waves aren't there.
Because they don't. Right. But you do not manage to quantify them or reproduce them, you yourself, through your conscious action, if you do not in some way have some form of conscious perception and action and, knowledge or any other form of reality creation abilities to express.
That's why we don't rely on a single person's perception, a subjective perception, to quantify reality. We use objective, reproducible measures.
But science can be limited by technology available.
How is it objective? How is it objective if you are limiting your perception to that of a human and the instruments that a human can use?
Let me ask you this: if there's something,
just because it's not complete doesn't mean it's not objective.
Risky, can I talk, bud?
Yes, sir.
I was going to say, if there's something that cannot be perceived by the human eye and it cannot be perceived by an instrument, why the fuck do you care if it exists in the first place?
Because that's the nature of humanity, is to ask all these existential questions, right?
Well, and it may not be.
If you can't verify that it exists to begin with, then what's the point of looking for it?
Well,
to actually get to a point of actually comprehending it.
Yeah,
luminiferous ether, fam.
The assumption with that question was there will never be a way to perceive it, whereas there actually may be a way to perceive it. Now, this does lead me to something, because I want to ask you guys how to put this question. Do you feel as though right now in 2018 that you are at the height of technological advancement that
No,
humans
because
have
the
ever
state
been
is
at?
limiting it.
Okay, but what I'm
hell no.
What I'm
wait,
specifically
wait, let me parse. Are you asking whether there have been prior civilizations which have achieved higher technological capabilities, or are you asking whether we have reached the peak of what is possible?
I am asking you if you believe that there are humans, whether it's a civilization or what, but humans who may have had advanced technology than we do as general
in the past. So in other words, the first scenario.
Sure. Yeah.
Of course, Nikola Tesla.
I don't know. I mean,
along the dry ice period. But here's the thing you got to understand. 12,900 years ago, we were in an ice age, and when we had the long dry ice period, it melted the ice, and we had a flood of about 400 feet tall wipe out everything on the coastlines. And that's where civilization was based. So if there was any advanced technology, it's been wiped out.
Now
we had to start over.
Are any of you possibly aware of senses that humans have been able to use possibly before that might be inhibited now by certain factors?
What do you mean, certain factors?
Like 4G blast through the air, or 5G.
Alien manipulation
People
of
have
the
more
genetic code and all
social
that.
skills than they used to.
Oh, I would say people have less social skills than they used to.
Well, I said worse, but I guess you said less. I mean,
I thought you
potato.
Right? Coercion, threat, you know.
Well, no, I thought you said that communication was better now. But
no, communication is definitely worse now.
Just tell me when you're gonna release your revenge porno. Take a look.
Well, you haven't gotten married yet, so.
That's what you think.
We're actually all polygamists. We all have several wives. So.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
We're Mormons.
That is actually a fair point.
We're Mormons.
I mean, I can own multiple cars, right? There's nothing wrong with that.
Now, are you also under the assumption that the things that are called the first and second law of thermodynamics are actually laws?
Yes.
I see.
That's kind of semantics.
So thermodynamics has to do with energy and heat, right? Like, I know it has something to do with mechanical engineering.
Well, yeah, mechanical engineering, you probably in certain instances want to think about thermodynamics broadly, but yeah, I mean, thermodynamics, the really awesome thing about thermodynamics is that, like, you can kind of see it. If you know, like, even a little bit about thermodynamics, you can kind of see it in everything. Mechanical systems, fucking, natural systems, it's everywhere. It's great.
From an engineer's perspective, everything's alive.
Yeah.
So
do you agree that without the state, we'd be way better off technologically speaking and way more advanced?
There is no state. You have yet to prove that there is a state.
If you use, like you mentioned, Tesla, right? If you agree that Tesla was a technological genius at his time, then that means that from then to now, there's been a lot of things that could have possibly flourished from that point to something that we obviously don't know what could be right now.
Well, yeah, I agree. Probably a lot of technology is suppressed.
Oh, you've never heard of Tesla motor cars, huh?
That's
also, I personally think SpaceX is fake.
That's a small
and
fry.
Scripted, and I debate. I don't know. There's a lot of technological advances too that I debate whether or not they actually happened.
Well, if you think about it from a business perspective, it doesn't really benefit a business to create something that's a technology that could be advanced in so many ways to just make a perfect, let's just say a perfect contraption. If it's perfect, then there's no need to make any more or enhance it or do anything.
Yeah, I mean, consumables are the best business, right? So
perfection itself is a limit. So,
well, for lack of a better word, something that provides a purpose that doesn't need any enhancements.
Okay, have you ever heard of the term planned obsolescence?
Yep.
Yes, that's exactly why we're limited.
Right. Well, that's how the economy turns. If every product was made to never fail, and you only bought one of them, eventually they'd run out of shit to sell you.
Well, I disagree with that because you always would have to maintain something. Everything needs maintenance because it will degrade.
Oh, there's that entropy again. Interesting.
Oh, so you believe that entropy is a law?
Yeah, I do believe. Do you have some mathematical proof that it is not? Because I'm pretty sure you could get some sort of prize there, as is
well,
very common in your tribe.
Well, certain materials don't degrade. There are materials that don't.
Like dolphins.
No, I'm talking about more. I'm talking about. I'm talking about more of resources like basic materials from the periodic table.
You know what? Plastic and certain turtles.
You know what doesn't degrade?
Condoms.
People's faith in the Catholic Church.
Well,
no matter how many
condoms are pretty long lasting.
What you're proposing is an atom which does not radiate, which I don't think I need to say any more on that.
Well, I mean, I would be interested in having you attempt to prove that entropy is a law at some point. But now,
I don't think that the burden of proof is on me, bud.
Well,
it's
you're
not.
the one. You did.
You're the one that's saying it's not a law. Now you need to prove us the exception.
You're
he never said
that it's not a law by saying that the burden of proof is on me. But come on.
Well, he never said it's not a law. He stated a question to you, and you answered in the affirmative that it was. Therefore, the burden of proof is upon you.
I will yield to the much more studied people who have already proved it.
Okay, so if you can find me someone that has proven it, then I would be greatly.
You need a table that basically says entropy is a law. When that table falls apart, you need to get another table that says the same thing.
That's your responsibility for your own assessments, Risky.
I need some factual evidence that there is an actual.
How about everything?
But one.
This guy has crippling autism. Crippling.
I know. I'm usually the most autistic and verbose person in the room, but I'm like peanut gallery compared to this guy.
I'm in here. I'm like, who the fuck are you? I walked Bob Dylan on stage. Who the fuck are you?
Guys, some things you think and just don't say out loud. Come on.
Well, I'm curious as to what you are claiming my tribe is.
Well, it's obvious you're a kike, dude. We can hear you.
I'm sorry?
What's a kike?
Crawl in my oven and find out.
What tribe are you saying I am?
I meant to come here and learn, not walk away feeling like a worse person.
Yeah, you're all right by me.
Like, memes are the best and worst of humanity.
This is true.
So what are you
I'm starting to think autism is.
What are you claiming a tribe is that I belong to?
All I'm saying is that you sound like you're genetically from Israel. All right.
Oh, no. That would be false.
He's poking fun, man.
So why would you
make in a stateless society, people would still be dicks. But like for better reasons, maybe.
I'm always gonna be a shitlord.
So, you keep mentioning this state. Do you have any evidence it exists?
I mean, I'm not saying it should exist. I'm just saying there's an illegitimate authority currently terrorizing society.
I would agree.
If it doesn't exist, go hop in your car and drive 100 miles an hour down a school zone. You tell me if it exists.
Well, technically, it wouldn't exist if people did not believe in it and didn't uphold it.
Right, there's a market for the government, which is why it exists,
buddy. You don't have to believe it, buddy. When a man with tears and berries
Okay, if nobody, answer me this then. If nobody, and I mean nobody, believed in government, and therefore there was no one to uphold
That's
its
not the
existence,
case. That's not the case, though. It exists right now.
because people acquiesce to it.
These aren't mutually exclusive things.
It exists only through the manifestation of those who choose to believe in it. Without said manifestation, it would be.
But effectively, that
topic.
means it exists. I would agree, but that effectively means it exists.
Technically, yes. I mean, yeah. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm saying that the cause of its existence is the belief in it.
So I want to hear I want to hear some evidence that the state exists.
So, just for shits and
Go
giggles.
drive 100 miles an hour down a school zone and see if a cop doesn't shove a baton up your ass, and then we'll answer that question.
You see,
That's only proof that a cop exists and is willing to impose violence
What does the
upon
cop
your
work
actions.
for? What does
That
the
is not
cop work
proof of
for?
the state.
What does the cop work for?
Who does? Are you asking who a cop works for?
Who pays? Who pays?
Starts
the
with an
cop
S
bill?
and ends with 8.
Well, no, it doesn't.
Tate.
The cop works.
Yeah, it ends with an E.
Let Lefos finish his point. Let Lefos finish his point about who the cops work for.
So first, if you're going to use a logical fallacy, then you've already lost.
Which fallacy is that?
Well, go 100 miles an hour in a 75-mile zone and see if a cop pulls you over.
That's
is
no
not
fallacy.
evidence.
That's a provable, observable test we can
That's
run.
not evidence
Right?
that this. That's
And
not
guess what?
evidence that a state
If a cop doesn't shove his foot up your ass, I will, motherfucker.
That's not evidence that a state exists.
What is it?
After you remove this size 12 Nike from your rectum, you can run to nobody to complain.
Wait. Let's get real elementary, like we always have to. What is your definition of a state?
Yep.
There isn't one because a state does not exist.
Well, you do make a claim about it not existing. So therefore, you do have something of an idea about what it is, even if it doesn't exist, to make a reference
Right.
to.
And even if the claim, even what other dude just said, like he's just saying, oh, there's people doing this thing, and that this is some sort of organizational structure. Well, we've all kind of sort of collectively agreed, except for this guy, that it's called a fucking state.
Well, no, it's the state would. In order for a state to exist, there would have to be citizens.
There would have to be what? There would have to be what?
Citizens of that state.
That's actually not true. All it really requires for a state to exist is for like more than one person to agree that
a flag,
some set of rules that they're going to both abide by, and
that is citizens, though, isn't that?
And enforce.
How is that a state?
There is no.
That's my definition of a state, essentially.
What specifically is your definition of a state? A group of people who agree to follow a set of rules.
No. That would be a voluntary situation. That's not the same thing.
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily, because some other person could come across and do something not voluntary, and they could, kill him or something. And then, there's a whole bunch of non-voluntary shit going on there. But the two guys who are abiding by each other's rules of each other are still a state, right? Like they're still cooperating under some social. Okay, let's get a more abstract definition. A state is a
man-made concept.
It's a set of rules. It's a social structure that is constructed by more than one person and abided by, adhered to by more than one person.
It's like
That's an organization.
Social contracts that are reinforced by violence.
Well, a state is an organization. What's the fucking difference?
I just want to state that this guy has crippling autism. All right.
The difference.
Would anyone like?
The difference between an organization and a state is that for a state to exist, there needs to be a belief in the authority of it, without which belief there is no such thing as a state.
Would anyone like to clarify Lepo's position by asking him what he defines to be a state, or
or
the construct thereof?
He said there was no definition of the state because the state doesn't exist. I don't see how much. There's not much to work with there.
No, actually, one of the guys has a point. I would want to hear Letho's.
I mean, I'm fine to hear out the clear, like
we've been trying to hear a lot.
Elaboration.
Again, you're bringing logic to an emotional gunfight.
Well, when you refuse to ask the right question, you can't get mad at him for not providing the answer you seek.
That's true, but it doesn't feel like it should be.
I mean, those same words do hold some relevance, but at the same time, they can be used manipulatively.
Yeah, certainly.
He's slimy as shit.
Lying by omission. Yeah, that is a good thing to point out.
I think he's like Terrence McKenna and Andy Kaufman in one person.
But I mean, if you have more to add to your definition of state, which is then like it doesn't exist, therefore like there's no fucking definition, then please add to it.
Well, it seems to me as though the commonly accepted definition of state is a situation where there exists those who have a duty of allegiance to the state in exchange for the state's so-called duty of protection.
I think he's more like Theodore Herzl, but that's just me.
So what you're saying is that based on what other people believe a state to be, or what you commonly know others to think of a state, you believe that it doesn't exist based on those definitions that have been put forth.
Well, I don't believe that it doesn't exist. It demonstrably does not.
You're saying it's illegitimate.
But by the definition that you just gave, it demonstrably does exist.
Oh, okay. So good, great. So show me one example where there exists someone who has a duty of allegiance to a state, where that state has an obligation of protection to that citizen.
In that context, no, there is no such thing as a state, because a state does not.
It doesn't have a duty to
protect people.
It doesn't have a duty to protect.
Yeah, so in this particular context and definition, Letos does have a point. There is no such thing as a state with this definition.
Oh wait, what about wherever Queen Elizabeth is, right?
Wherever what is?
Queen Elizabeth, like maybe there's some duty to protect Queen Elizabeth. Does that count?
Yeah,
that's bullshit.
Yeah, what about the Pope?
What about it?
That is also
there are people who protect him, and that get there are people who protect the fucking the Roman state, if you will.
Okay, but whether or not there are people who protect something is irrelevant. What we're talking about is an obligation.
I think all the citizens would be obligated to protect the Pope.
Define an obligation.
Well, let me look up the. I tend to look at dictionary.com.
Do you tend to look at your own mind and make up your own definitions? I mean, I'm not saying this sarcastically
the dictionary is subjective.
It's just right now this conversation has been going on a long time. I haven't eaten yet and I have a headache, so I'm not very interested in creating my own.
Bud.
So an obligation is something by which a person is bound or obliged to do certain things, and which arises out of a sense of duty or results from custom, law, etc. A binding promise.
Bound by a sense. So they're bound internally by some sense of morality or some sense of honor or code. In other words. So I would say that probably every person in any state military probably didn't just join the military because no reason. They probably felt some sense of binding code to do that.
Called patriotism.
Well, it doesn't really matter which code it is. It matters that they felt bound to do so, right?
Murder, death, kill.
The way to figure out if someone has an obligation to do something is to see if they will be held responsible if they do not do something.
So, like, if someone commits a war crime and then is held responsible for it by, like, going to jail or something, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's happened.
Well, for example, if you fail to protect someone and something happens to that person, are you going to be held responsible for what happened to them?
I mean, that may be one possible scenario, but I mean, that I would argue that that's not the only. Yeah, I mean, that seems pretty limiting. Seems to be not the only possible.
Okay, well, that seems to be the common understanding of how a state exists, is if...
Oh, that's a fucking hell of an assertion. Come the fuck on, dude.
Well, I asked you to define state. You never did. I gave you my definition. You did
bullshit.
not.
Shut the fuck up. I had a definition. You can't just say that I didn't define it. You're fucking straight up disingenuous, dude.
What was your definition?
I said it was a set of rules that people agreed to, essentially.
But that's not what it's
brief. Oh, but because you are the most disingenuous person I have argued with in like several years, dude.
How so?
That isn't the black calling the kettle pot, Risky.
Yeah, shut up.
What you just defined was an organization. That's not a state.
So a state can't be an organization?
I never said that.
Well, you just implied it.
No, I mean,
no, he did not imply it.
A state, so a state can be a subset of an organization, right? You understand set theory, like how an apple is fruit, but fruit aren't necessarily apples. A state can be an organization, but organizations aren't necessarily states.
So instead of defining the actual thing, you're going to define something that it is a subset.
No, you just keep refusing, even though I have a definition, which, I mean, that's fine if you disagree with it. It's fine if it's not even correct. But for you to say that I didn't define it, you're literally just lying.
Well, you didn't.
You're straight up lying. No, I did. I did it twice now.
You have not defined what a state is.
He has, but
an organization.
He has.
Dude, those are like Jedi mind tricks.
You're a piece of shit, dude.
How so?
You just straight up lying to me to my face, even though I just gave you a definition.
I'm not lying.
You're lying to everyone else that's listening right now.
Let me try and interrupt a little bit. Do you think that Santa Claus is real? Because if you think Santa Claus is real, then do you think a state is real, or do you think a state is just a fiction of your imagination?
Hey man, Santa Claus gave us the
Hey, do you think language is real? Do you think language is real?
We're speaking right now, yes.
Yeah, okay, so it's like some things don't have to be a physical entity to exist in some categorical fashion, right? Like it can be a structure within humans' minds, and it can still exist. Like language.
How about this?
Abstraction is still real.
A fucking state. Whoa, what do you know?
How about this? Can we agree that the fiction known as a state is just men and women in a building, whatever else you want to call it?
I do like that definition for some reason.
Well, it's simple. That's all they are. They call you up. Hi, I'm from Walmart, IRS, CFR, and IBM. Hey, you owe me money.
Well, effectively, I mean, that's fine. I mean, I would have a little bit different of a definition, but effectively, you're making the same argument that I am, which is that regardless of how you define it, like be it men and women in a building or some organizational structure that humans abide by, which is my definition, that the state in fact does exist in the same sense that mathematics and that language exists and the scientific fucking process. And this guy refuses to accept my definition, which I gave 3 times now, and he's lying to all of you when he says that I didn't give a fucking definition, and that's why you're a piece of shit, dude.
So for me, a state is not real. It's just men and women, and you keep calling it a state, saying the state is real. No, men and women are real in a building, calling themselves Walmart, the state, or anything else. It's just a name they're calling themselves. So this fictitious Santa Claus is fake. But the
companies aren't real.
You know, that's a straw man argument. It can be real and illegitimate.
May I finish? But men with guns called elves in blue uniforms, those exist.
Yeah, I guess we're not totally speaking language right now, and I guess language totally isn't real because you can't point at a physical fucking thing about it, right?
So again, you're trying to mix the apples and oranges with language. We're speaking, we're comprehending, and that's why we have terms and definitions, so we comprehend what I'm thinking in my head and what you're thinking in your head, or we can visualize it. So
yeah,
when you,
in other words, behavior.
So when you say the state is real, I'm trying to visualize. Is it Santa Claus? Yeah, basically it is. What's behind Santa Claus? Well, men and women pretending to live in a North Pole with guns, and that's all.
No.
Because the state is also a pervasive network that does exist, and it is illegitimate.
It's a set of behaviors, just like language. Set of behaviors.
This is why I have asked you to define what a state is. I can point to an organization, which is something.
It's a set of behaviors.
So what is a state?
It's a set of behaviors.
A state
it's a virus.
Is a set of behaviors?
A set of behaviors that people collectively abide by. Wow, that's so fucking complicated, guys.
The state is a manufactured and illegitimate network of mafia authority that reinforces an invisible grid.
It still exists.
Y'all took too much fucking mushrooms or some shit.
Show me a person.
You guys just haven't done DMT yet, man.
Show me a person who has abided by the state.
I follow
military and police
every day, don't you?
One person who's abided by the state. Everyone who's ever been drafted into war.
How is that abiding by the state?
There are 330 million of people in this country that abide by the state. If they don't, they get locked in boxes.
So are you saying that to abide by the state, that doesn't have to happen of your own free will?
You might
you're
think
like
it's
a Larkin
illegitimate.
Rose fan, aren't you?
You might think it's illegitimate, but
you're a
it's
fan
still
of Larkin
there.
Rose.
I'm asking you a question. Are you going to answer the question or not?
Do you not think there's anyone in the United States that, if given the option between like
wait,
no
the United what?
The United
I'm sorry?
States.
The United of not existing what?
Oh my god.
Jesus fucking.
What was the question?
Keep going.
I love this shit. No, the point is that there are people here that would obey the state even without threat of force. They would. Do you not think anyone there?
What we call a statist.
How do you know?
Well, obeying a social construct sans police force is not statism, it is anarchism. It is living freely amongst one another, not imposing your will on anyone else.
Dude, I made this fucking I was making these arguments fucking 10 years ago. I have an anarchy symbol fucking tattooed on my chest, bro. Like, I'm so fucking familiar with this shit. It's just tiresome, all right, dude.
Except that you're a minarchist.
Dude, I'm all about solutions and where we go from here. I understand the frustration.
Now I'm a minarchist because I was in these circles for 10 fucking years, and guess where it got me? Fucking nowhere. And guess where I watched my fucking country go, and the tangible fucking places that I lived.
Your country.
The tangible places where I live turn shittier and shittier, and this is leading you fucking nowhere. So
well, I just want to put you in jail because you want to do revenge porn. So how about that?
We're gonna put you in jail just for that. You can sit on your ivory tower and talk about Manap all day long while your wife gets raped by a fucking refugee, and I'll fucking.
Whoa!
I guess I'll just. Hey,
whoa!
Is that a reflection on the circles that you were in, or is it a reflection on your inability to grasp constructs?
Well, he clearly doesn't. He clearly doesn't grasp anarchism.
Dude, I clearly read Rothbard, I read fucking Lysander Spooner, I read all the shit, dude. So you can fucking shove that shit up your ass. I don't give a fuck about your fucking.
You read it, but did you retain any of it?
Yes, because me and Risky and everyone else in our little group or whatever, we could never have moved away from anarchism because it's the
end goal. You get there and you never progress anymore.
No one could change their mind.
Well, I would argue there's the primal way of living, right? Isn't that sort of the evolved anarchism down the road?
Look, you want to know where right-leaning property-based anarchism leads you? It leads you back to a fucking state, and it leads you back to your tribe.
How do you figure?
It leads you.
It's not anarchism then.
Because when you realize human nature is tribal, and that all of the people that are coming into your fucking environment right now, as we speak, don't give a fuck about your concepts. They don't give a fuck about who you are. They don't give a fuck about any of your history. They literally laugh as your fucking race, assuming you're white, is literally being extinct. Extincted. I don't know what the fucking.
So you're racist.
Well, that's on purpose.
You not only don't understand what anarchism is, but you're also a racist.
Look,
yes,
so,
I'm.
You know what?
I'm
God, a racist! No,
you know what?
Actually, I have a question based on that dude's comment. Does anyone think that hierarchy is sort of inevitable?
Well, it is absolutely unavoidable.
That is bullshit. Only
reality.
We're not.
Only those with a slave mind agree with hierarchy.
We're
anyone who has any.
You know what I find interesting? That we were discussing state. We used a definition, agreed that definition, based on the definition, it made sense. But then now we're continuing to argue about state. I'm confused.
We moved on to hierarchy.
Yeah, the problem is not hierarchies. The problem is involuntary hierarchies. Anarchism
I can agree with Ms.
solve the problem. Anarchism always solves the problem of
hierarchy.
The problem is puppies.
The whole problem with hierarchy is that someone attempts to impose upon another that they perceive to be less powerful in whatever regard. So therefore, it is violent by its very design. Anarchy.
Only
you can have voluntary hierarchy.
Yes, you can, but that's still...
Hierarchy doesn't have to mean a ruling class. It's like certain classes are above one another but don't rule over each other. Like
if a guy knows how to program and another one doesn't, he is higher in the hierarchy of being able to do
yes, we all have different skills and whatever, but that does not mean that we are spiritually or morally higher than those who are more or less skillful than us. I mean,
who gives a fuck?
Right. Right. But,
so because you have a higher level of intellect doesn't mean that others are inferior to you.
Okay. Yeah, they may express less of an intellect than whoever is supposed to be more intelligent in this particular context, but that does not make them any less human or valuable as a specimen of life or whatever.
That's the most positive thing I've heard so far.
Yeah, until you go look at Africa, which has an average IQ of about 75, and you realize that these people, for the most part, if you go to Africa, they'll fucking kill you. They'll rip you apart. Some of them will even eat you and not even blink.
Look, I'm not saying I'm not saying that we shouldn't defend ourselves against them.
Let me ask you this, Pajit.
Don't tempt me.
You're on an island. You have enough rations. You have enough rations for 3 people. There's 4 of you on the island. You've got a doctor who has the wealth of an encyclopedia inside his head. You've got a construction worker who knows how to build and survive and shit. And you've got some nigger who sits and eats bananas and scratches his balls all day. Which one's more valuable to you? Which one's getting kicked off the island?
Can we add a pregnant lady?
From a practical...
I get the point that Ron White is trying to make.
From a practical perspective, yes, of course, that nigger is just as...
He said the N-word.
But if that nigger were white or Asian, it doesn't matter. His contextual uselessness is still there, regardless of the race.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Yeah, but you agree with
the non-racial definition.
No, he's right, but the simple fact is that statistically speaking, it is far more likely that a person who is from Africa is going to be low IQ and is not going to contribute to your little island society. He's not going to be able to
of
do
lower
shit.
agency.
How did
My point is that particular group is more prone to have lower agency. Okay, so when you are putting a value and a hierarchy in place, you take the people with the lowest agency and you put them at the bottom of this hierarchy. Why? Because they contribute less and there is less value to the group.
Well, that's not exactly a hierarchy. It's just assigning roles to whoever is capable of